Hello and welcome to episode 60 of Randomer Nintendo, and we're going full tilt back to the old random Nintendo. It's episode 285. Cue the music. And I'm your host, Jason. You can edit in that music for me, Kevin.
Yep.
And speaking of Kevin, we got Kevin here on one side as a co-host.
I am Kevin.
And we got Angel on the other side as the other co-host.
Angel's here.
No, we're supposed to. You're supposed to go. I'm Jason, and then we go down the line.
Oh, you want to do the whole
rigmarole?
We're really throwing back. All right, let's restart. Pretend you just heard the music, everyone listening. Wow.
Nope, I'm just straight up putting the music in right now.
Yeah, we all co-hosted together when it was still just Random Nintendo, right? You didn't start with us for Quarantine Chronicles?
I Sora would lead, but then we would do the roll call. So, okay, we need the music
all
a third time now.
Okay.
Like, you need to, do a record scratch on the second one.
I'm adding the music here.
Hello and welcome to Randomer Nintendo 60, a.k.a. Random Nintendo number 285. I'm Jason. Wow, Angel.
And I'm Angel?
There you go.
Kevin was next.
Wow.
You're always
dude, it's only been a few years. It's only been a few years. But yeah,
I'm so used to being told when to talk.
For those who have no idea what's happening right now, if you somehow only discovered
I don't know
us in
what's
the
happening
Randomer.
Right okay.
If you only discovered us in the Randomer days, the old show, top to bottom, very Nintendo heavy, and there's so much Switch stuff happening that only feels right to throw back. So, I gotta be honest, what we were saying last episode, like how we wanted to wait for the dust to settle before recording our coverage of the Switch 2 Direct and all the subsequent news, I don't think, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, I don't think we expected there to be so much dust that had to settle. Like, this rollout...
There's still some dust that has
There's still
yet to
dust
be
in the
settled.
air. I know. This rollout has been all over the place. Like, there are hardware and software up and downs. There's obviously the pricing discussion and Nintendo then needing to backpedal the pre-order plan due to the broader tariff situation. There's all sorts of little things in between. Like I don't think anyone at Nintendo wanted it to go quite like this. And it's definitely an interesting rollout. And don't get me wrong, there's still a ton I'm excited for. I mean, for me personally, I don't think to the detriment of those around me, I don't think I've stopped talking about the Switch 2 since it was announced. But slam dunk smooth reveal, this was not.
Your
even
poor
earlier
wife.
today. I know. Actually, I've been sparing her. It's really everyone else that I come across. It's strangers on
Rachel,
the street.
if you're
Have you seen
listening,
the Switch?
You have our numbers if you need help.
Blink twice if you need help. But yeah, but even earlier today, to your point about the dust still not selling, today, we're recording this on Monday, April 7th, and I feel it's important to state that because by Tuesday, April 8th, there's going to be 6 new things about the Switch 2 we didn't know, or 6 corrections, or 6 more confusing points. So as of this recording, as of today, a bunch of executive interviews dropped where they tried to explain and justify everything, and now those are understandably being dissected by everyone online. So that's where we're at. That's where my head's at. How are you guys doing, just in general, before we dive all the way in? Everyone good? Everyone... ready?
That's what when we're to put it. I'm finally feeling better. I was I don't know if I said this last podcast, but at work we were having what we were affectionately calling Hell Week.
That's a fun sounding name.
Yeah, I worked pretty much Monday all the way through yesterday, Sunday. No,
Wow.
today's no, yeah.
Today's
See, I
Monday.
can't even remember. I can't keep track of my days. Yeah, I pretty much worked the entire week last week.
Wow.
It sounds
Jeez.
like this reminds me, only in name alone, that week in Santa Barbara, I think it was called, not Dead Week, but the week before finals also had a
Dead Week,
like that.
which coincidentally is the exact opposite in terms of flurry of activity as Hell Week sounds like it is. Dead Week everyone was studying, but it's way lower key than whatever Kevin just went through. Yeah.
Yeah, literal.
But it's in the rear view, Kevin. Things are slowed down a little.
Yeah, thankfully.
That's good.
I didn't go in today. I'm thinking about working from home tomorrow, and yeah,
You should definitely work home if you can.
yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it's working home so nice. How about you, Angel? How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Great. Okay. Anyway, was there nothing exciting going on with you?
Not particularly. I am on the cusp of wrapping up some shows that I've been watching, and have just made a couple more changes to my overall schedule. So I'm hoping these changes are just better for me in the long run. A couple mentality shifts, future goal, like replannings, and I don't know. There's a lot on that front. That's been kind of a mental journey, for lack of a better term, that I'm frankly still going on, and it's been good. It's been, it's not easy, but it's been good. I don't know. This sounds like I'm being very cryptic, but like I, I I think what I'm getting at is that I feel like I've had to reprioritize a lot of things and come to terms with a lot of things if I feel I wanted to make any headway in actually becoming like a professional illustrator or something like that. That has just been keeping me from just simply going for it rather than being like, oh, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. Or like, this isn't good enough yet. Like, we're still getting there, but I feel like I'm on the cusp of just finally getting through that little push. Yeah, didn't expect for this to be kind of how I've been, but I mean, there you go, little slice of
Well,
angel.
it's important. It's important for your own future. It's important for your well-being. It's important to free up time for the Switch 2 before June. So I get it on all levels. I assume that's exactly why you're doing it right now, is because of the Switch 2 in June, right?
Yeah, I need to make sure I have time to actually play video games because I haven't really had time to play on my own. So with this new schedule, I should have about an hour or two every day that in theory I could use for that.
They could pour right into
Hopefully I
Mario Kart
can
World.
beat some games before Switch 2 comes out because Mario Kart, as we all know, is some of those evergreen titles that just never gets beaten. So, you just keep playing it. So,
Yeah.
they're the killers of campaign games. So, yeah.
So, with that in mind, to prepare you, you're already preparing yourself for Switch 2, but to prepare everyone else for Switch 2, we did want to talk about it a bit this episode, more than a bit. The whole episode's dedicated to it. To help make this all a bit more digestible, almost in the same way, Angel, that you're trying to like organize things for yourself. I did an old school style, like random Nintendo notes doc, and I tried to like divide our conversation and thoughts into 3 buckets that we could just kind of mosey through. So there's the hardware, there's the software / games, and there's the logistics of how this all came together or didn't come together, as the case may be for a lot of it. So, not to use an old Xbox slogan, but let's jump in and get started. So, first up, hardware. First thoughts, hot takes. What you guys got?
Like from us?
Yeah. What's your, like, when you saw the full hardware, what jumped out at you as like, what was your like hot take? What jumped out at you as cool? What jumped out at you as silly? What jumped out, like, does it seem like it's are you excited? Is it what you expected? Were there surprises? Like, where'd you kind of land on it? Like, when you saw it, what was your initial, like, oh, was it like, yeah, I'm into it? No, thank you. Where'd you land?
Oh man, I mean, this may not sound exciting, but I don't think I had really much of any kind of change in take from the initial like hardware reveal. Like how I felt on that one, which essentially boiled down to, oh, thank God, it's still just a Switch, but just a little bigger. Like I've said before many times, I feel like I'm still not really ready to move on from the Switch. This being just like a Switch, literally a Switch upgrade, and not like a whole new redesign of a console or reinvention of what Nintendo's going to be doing with consoles for the foreseeable future. That was like when I had my big like, oh, thank God. This time around, it was just like okay, cool. I honestly didn't feel like I learned anything new. I'm sure I did because I'm sure there's
but for your
plenty of
purposes
stats.
And why you want it.
Yeah,
it wasn't
I'm sure there were plenty of stats and numbers and I guess we didn't know that the dock was going to have a fan or that some games were going to be running on this frame rate or blah blah blah. Like none of that really mattered to me. Like it was just nice to see full trailers for some of these games, knowing that some other games were coming. But hardware wise, Yeah, internal storage is nice, but I'm probably gonna get another 2 terabyte micro SD card like I did for my last Switch.
Just
for my
remember,
current
get an
Switch.
express one because they need the faster read write. The regular SDs won't work.
Oh, which is fine. I'll still need it for my old Switch because I'll still use. I like to keep one at work and one at home. So, like, if anything, the new cartridge switching do
I guess the virtual
thing.
game cards, as they're called. Yes.
Yeah, like that is that is such a nice alternative to what I've had to do, which is like the console having to constantly ping the internet, like, can this game be played? And me having to keep logging into work Wi-Fi to give myself permission to access it so that it could ping the server so that I could play my own games, which, is annoying. But luckily I only have to do that like once a week. But
quick
yeah,
heads up to those who aren't familiar with virtual game cards. Anyone that's listening to this probably knows, but they were actually in the presentation a week. Nintendo had 2 directs in 6 days, which but yeah, so they in the first direct they announced this thing, virtual game cards, where basically the idea is whatever Nintendo system you sign into with your Nintendo account, you have access to view the library of all the games you have ever downloaded on any of the systems in the form of these sort of like virtual game cards, as they call them. And whichever system has the game card installed on it, you can eject the virtual game card, and then it's free to run on a different system. And as long as you initially, when you first set up your account on the system, do it on the internet and it verifies you're really you can kind of just bounce around these game cards willy-nilly. I guess you do need to connect every so often just to get an update on which game cards are sitting on which system, because it's all
we'll see how often.
It's
but
still
they did say
cleaner.
Yeah, I mean, they did say all right, yeah, the initial connection obviously will be needed when you have to reping the mother server or whatever.
So apparently you don't ever need a reping if it's for games that are marked as. You only need a ping if you want to change the game status between systems versus every time. Like the primary, secondary thing is out the window. Yeah.
Which, because for all intents and purposes, it will be my account on both. So I'm just glad that it's at least going to be between 2 different consoles, a Switch 2 and a Switch 1 versus a Switch and a Switch, which sure
also works. Yeah.
Yeah, which does work, but like I said, that causes more headaches with the constant repinging that I do have to keep.
One other cool thing about virtual game cards is you can lend them out for up to, I think it's 2 weeks at a time. So anyone on your family share plan, if you have a Switch Online family plan, anyone on that plan, you can just have them plug the game card into their system as if you were handing someone in your household an actual game card. So it actually adds a lot of flexibility back
for some families, but
purchases.
I can't think of too many times that I would do that.
Well, if you're, I think it's great if you're like parenting kids and you're a parent that has whatever game, and now you can just let the kid have the game. While before you would need to be the one purchasing it from your account, and then you'd have to let them play it on their account. There's probably a lot of use cases.
No, no. That's what I said. That outside of families, I don't know what I would personally use it much for.
Right, because saying you don't know what you would use it for. Yeah.
Yeah, because single player games, as long as they are the full download. I mean, not the full download. As long as they are the full game in the cartridge, I still plan on getting single player only campaign games as a cartridge, and like I did with the Switch, continue to get the multiplayer games. Or, I mean, I consider Animal Crossing kind of like a multiplayer game, but those games that, to me, just make more sense to have downloaded on the console at all time. And it's been a pretty amazing experience doing that. I don't regret doing it. If anything, man, maybe having the single player games might be a nice change of pace.
Well, you have 2 months to think, or 7 weeks to think about it. So
yeah, that's true.
What about you, Kevin? Where'd you land on, just as a whole, when you're watching that direct with the hardware? Are you, especially someone that plays beyond just Nintendo consoles more? I mean, Angel, you obviously play a lot of PlayStation, but Kevin has a Steam Deck. So where do you land on this?
Strictly only speaking console, or the direct total, or
let's just talk console for now, and we'll work our way down through everything that was in it first. Yeah.
I mean, strictly speaking console, it's an impressive piece of tech. Even as a Switch, even as a Steam Deck owner, quite honestly. The bigger screen is nice. A little disappointing that it's not OLED right off the gate, but
sure.
I think that's something that we talked about when we were in the group chat when the direct was happening.
Yeah, I on that note, real quick, I am very curious. I read some impressions from people that played it already that say it actually is It's a much better LCD tech than what they used in the first Switch. So while it doesn't have like the deep blacks of OLED, like the Switch OLED I love that I have, it is surprisingly good. So I'm actually very curious to see what like my knee-jerk reaction is when I first pick it up on Friday at the LA event, because like I've been used to OLED Switch since 2021. So like I'll instantly be like, oh, or I won't even notice anything. I'm kind of hoping it's the latter, but we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah. From like some reports that I've seen, it sounds like Cyberpunk is running at a cool 40 frames a second undocked, which is relatively around the same power as a Steam Deck. So like it's definitely impressive, and knowing that it has NVIDIA's DLSS and frame generation is also very, very enticing if you don't have a Steam Deck. So as far as the hardware itself, I'm fairly impressed, and I'm content with what I'm hearing this system can push out.
Yeah, it does seem. I mean, there was like it has, as you said, DLSS, but NVIDIA is also claiming it's like 10 times more powerful than the original Switch.
Which that means nothing to me, quite honestly.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, as a Switch only gamer, that sounds like ooh, but yeah. But yeah, it does ray tracing. Like it's catching up with a lot of stuff the industry does. Even like little things like they have separate chips to do like noise and video isolation for some of the game chat features. Like it really sounds like tech spec speaking, they did really think this through as a way to like get on par with what the console gaming experience is for people outside Nintendo, or come close to it at least. So it's obviously not the same as a PS5 Pro by any means, but like it wasn't. Nintendo for a long time was a full generation behind visually, and I've been seeing comparison screenshots and stuff online where like we're hitting that point where it's starting to, you can still nitpick and find things, but like at passing glance it's close, which is impressive, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's pretty cool to see. I do want to talk about a new function. I kind of mentioned it already. Unless there's anything else you want to say, Kevin, about the hardware.
No, about the hardware, no.
Okay, I want to talk about a new function. It is hardware, but it's also software, so we're kind of bridging a little. GameChat. So there's a part of me that wishes Nintendo flipped their attention around. Like they had such a heavy focus on GameChat, yet the mouse and the Joy-Con was just kind of there, and I felt like the mouse was going to be a more interesting, unique part of the proposition here. But yeah, like the first feature they revealed in the Direct and spent a full 7 minutes discussing was GameChat. And I know when we were in our group text, Kevin, you had strong thoughts on GameChat just basically being Discord.
I don't necessarily know if my thoughts are strong, just as much as how impressed you were that Discord
exists
was
in Nintendo.
Yeah, like you were like, oh, I think it's neat. I'm like, Jason, it's just Discord. It's worse Discord.
So here's the thing. On some, you're right, but on some level, like I kind of get what's like the entire thesis of Switch 2 is that it takes what you love about Switch 1 and expands on it, right? So like it's basically the default elevator pitch. They've said in all the interviews that came out today, you can see it with the physical size of the console being bigger. You can see it with the emphasis on adding more power to the existing form factor. It's what we're seeing with how they're approaching the games that you play on Switch 2, like literally expanding Switch 1 games into these Switch 2 editions, or like taking existing gameplay ideas existing games and putting in new gameplay ideas in ways that only Switch 2 can power, be it, Mario Kart Open World or DK Bananza doing like this 3D platforming with like Zelda style freedom and how you like terraform your way through levels, more on the games later. But my point is, like, I feel like the game chat thing, while it is kind of just Discord, is also really honing in on that whole like evolution, not revolution thing we were talking about when they did the teaser in January. And like, I in a way, the Joy-Con mouse falls into that too as a new input. And I thought that would be a bigger bullet point, like I was saying. But like game chat, as overemphasized as it was, and at the surface level, it looks as just like a Discord. From like the Nintendo side, they do seem to be viewing it as the evolution of the core premise of the Switch. And it's interesting. Like it's not just play anytime, anywhere like Switch 1 was. Now it's also like this whole play all together thing. You know, you don't need a third-party app. You don't need a jerry-rig streaming setup. It's baked into the console. It's a core function. It has its own button. It's a feature that lets you like create the feeling of gathering around the couch for some multiplayer Nintendo games in a way Nintendo's never presented before in their ecosystem. And yeah, I don't know. Like, to elaborate a bit, one thing I thought was interesting in the Ask the Developer interviews that Nintendo published after the Direct, and there are a lot of them, but one of the things they're saying is how they describe the idea behind GameChat as being that of like a student lounge, which seems to suggest the rumors of the lead up to Switch 2 reveal, where like the C button was supposedly tied to this feature codenamed Campus. Well, seems like that was valid because student lounge, campus, but also B, colleges are really the place where Nintendo's local multiplayer angle truly shines. And I'm sure you guys remember like the early Switch 1 trailers. There's such a focus on not just being like out in the physical world with your console caliber games, but being able to like hand a Joy-Con to anyone with you and start up local multiplayer. You know, there's like Karen on the rooftop. There was that shot of all the guys like playing basketball and then switching over to NBA 2K instead of just like continuing to play real basketball where they were on the court. But there's this idea that like Switch was not just a way to play games in a scenario, but like it's inherently like a social gaming platform in this very Nintendo-y local multiplayer kind of way. And that was a huge tentpole of the initial value of the initial Switch. So while initially when you're like, oh, it's like Discord, I'm like, oh yeah, it is. For Nintendo, like looking at it through the lens of like in the Nintendo ecosystem, this feature now exists. The idea they've now enabled you to not just like physically recreate those social experiences anywhere with Switch, but now virtually do so at the press of a C button, the same easiness it was as handing off a Joy-Con in the original Switch. I can see why they think it's a big deal. And I can see why they're marketing it so hard. And I can see why they really, like literally the whole tagline of the console went from anytime, anywhere to now altogether anytime, anywhere. And this, for better or worse, it is. It really is. But this, for better or worse, is like, you know, we were talking about when the leaks were happening, oh, there's going to be some software-based hook that will differentiate and expand what Switch 2 can do in a new direction. Like, you know, Switch Pass on 3DS took DS wireless capabilities and like did something different with them. And, you know, for better or worse, GameChat's that. Like, it's literally that. It's this software feature they're presenting as this like kind of big new thing that expands what you're used to doing with the Switch, but in a different direction. And I think that was why I was kind of like, oh, I mean, I you know, thought about it more after, but in the moment I was just like, oh, okay. So that's why I'm not just like, oh, it's Discord, whatever, and disregarding it totally, because Nintendo's putting a lot of stuff into it. Where I'm a little more hesitant is that the experience itself isn't new to really anyone, which I think is kind of what you were saying, essentially, right? Like, at least not on the surface, like we have Discord, we have phones, we have Zoom calls, we have Google Meet, we've got people with streaming setups. You've got kids used to playing like hundreds, if not thousands of hours in like Fortnite or Minecraft, chatting away with friends on whatever headset app combo they've been using for years. You have screen sharing on PS5. Like, it might have been a miscalculation for Nintendo to dedicate 7 minutes to this feature at the top of the Direct and then release a separate 5-minute video the next day showing you how people play games online with their voices, which is something
I think that's somewhere where I'll disagree with. I'll disagree there, which I don't think that it's a miscalculation in any single part of Nintendo's part. I just think they are hyping it up to be this revolution that it just isn't.
Where I think that's fair. Where I think the miscalculation may lie is less in that they felt the need to show it and more what they showed. Like, I don't think we should
you have to show something like this because you have to prove
like ease people in
that not necessarily that you just have to prove that you have something that you haven't had, especially something like a Discord, right? Something that Xbox and Sony do right now. They have Discord integration. You have to put your foot out in one way or another. I just hate that it came wrapped in this Nintendo bow of like, isn't what we're doing so exciting? To a degree, it is exciting because you know what? Finally, we do have Discord on Switch. But to another degree, it's like you are so close, Nintendo. You are so close because while cool, you have Discord. It's essentially Discord that's just limited to Nintendo products to GameChat. You know?
Right.
But I
Yeah.
don't agree that it's a miscalculation on their part. No, they absolutely had to do this. They absolutely had to show something like this.
Yeah, that's fair. I think where for me it felt like a bit of a miscalculation is like, because like I was saying, like I think as a piece of the Switch 2 like value proposition, being like, hey, you could do stuff multiplayer in real life, and I could do stuff multiplayer online with just as much ease, is like a natural expansion of what Switch does. Like I was saying, but I think the emphasis they did on just, hey, what you could do in real life, you can do like virtually now. Like there's way more interesting stuff in there that they only really were telling you about if you like actually started to read those Ask the Developer interviews. Like these interviews with like the Switch 2 and GameChat leads. I mean, first of all, they seem very proud of this edition. They aren't even sugarcoating that it's not an original idea, which, you know, for Nintendo, they're kind of like Apple a lot of time, like, oh, we did this crazy thing you never imagined. Like they pretty candidly were talking about how like in Switch 2's development, you know, it started in like 2019 and that's when the pandemic hit, and they had all these people pointing their cameras at like game screens for developer updates on like video chats, and they saw all the screens lined up and they were kind of like, we should explore this more seriously. But I think it's just the layers to it is where maybe I feel like Nintendo miscalculated what they show. Because initially it did just kind of look like they have Discord, but not quite Discord. But, you know, we know Nintendo never gives up on an idea, which, funny enough, one of the Switch 2 leads, a guy named Takahiro Doda, he straight up said in the interview that exact thing, that they never give up on an idea. But, you know, knowing Nintendo's like this, you can see how this was like pieced together from like taking the idea of Zoom and putting in past Nintendo thoughts. Like you got hints of WeSpeak with the room-based voice chat solution that can do multiple people with no headset and actually differentiate them. There's the Wii U gamepad with its video calls. Even like the game chat screen sharing kind of reminds me a little of how Nintendo Switch Online's like retro games are done, in which you can just hop into someone else's NES or like N64 session or whatever and just like watch or participate. Like if you put all that in a blender with some advancements in all those technologies, you get pretty much game chat. And then when digging further in the interviews, some of the bigger advantages of baking it in and not just outsourcing it to Discord, for example, I think that's where it begins to emerge, because there's interesting potential here. Like one thing they pointed out is how when Switch let console games suddenly be played on the go, it made existing experiences feel different. Like being able to play Breath of the Wild portable versus at home was a unique thing. The developer didn't have to do anything special for it. There's no like API to hook into. It just worked because it was a Switch game, and there's that added value to the game of being able to like go out with it. And they seem to be angling that there's a similar situation Game Chat can now provide here. Like they talk about how you can have single player games that suddenly, you know, you're playing in front of friends, because the idea is everyone can be doing their own thing, or you could be sharing any game, and you can make a social experience out of it. So you could change how a game feels just by putting it on Switch 2 and people using Game Chat. Like the example they gave was Part-Time UFO of all games. And they were saying, you know, it's a time-based stage completion type of game, but friends can basically do races of who can finish the stage first just because Game Chat's there. Like they don't have to build multiplayer, it's just there. And that kind of reminds me of Angel. Do you remember there's a time we were taking a train somewhere and we basically turned Ding Dong XL of all games into like a high score challenge between the two of us? Normally a single player game. It has a 2-player mode, but we were doing single player and we just kept alternating back and forth. Like they're basically like, yeah, any game on Switch 2, you can just make online and do stuff like that. You don't need to be on a train. You don't need to be in the same place. You could just do whatever. But the key thing is the developers don't have to build anything in. It's just part of Switch 2, which is interesting to me.
Can't you say that about literally any game in the history of anything?
Because we did that already with our friend Nigel. Like we would play some single player games together online.
Right. But didn't
I
you
know.
What about it being on the Switch or the Switch 2 make it any more?
Because you don't have to. It's hooked into the console itself. Like you don't have to make an alt account somewhere else.
Not this. I'm saying not this experience that you're talking about. Like, right? Like, how is that different from us playing like a game on a phone? Like, what I'm saying is this experience of, we don't have to develop anything on it because. Like, how is that just different from like us playing on a mobile phone, like a mobile phone title or like a Game Boy title or a DS title?
Because you were getting baked in split screen as a console feature.
I think I might have misinterpreted what you were saying, but you're saying like
basically what they're saying. I'm just kind of regurgitating what they're saying because I thought it was an interesting point. Is because Game Chat has the whole screen share and like it's like a Zoom call for gaming, and it's baked in console level. any game can suddenly be a split screen game. Any game experience you can suddenly turn into how you could pass a controller back and forth in person, or how you can.
So there's game sharing baked in.
Yes, you're getting a little heavy. There literally is for select tiles. But my point is, for if two people own a game,
Gotcha. Okay.
and you're remote, if you and I both own Part-Time UFO, which is a strictly single player game,
Yeah.
and then I'm on game share, and I'm like, do you want to do a stage like speed run, basically, who can get through the most stages quickest? We can see each other doing it and sort of make it a multiplayer game should we choose to.
Oh, okay.
That's a very
now I see. I misunderstood the quote.
No worries. It's no worries.
I know. It's
I was like,
we're just playing the
what
same
is-
game together
Uh-huh.
versus like remote play where like I'm literally like when I forgot who I did this with.
Yes.
Maybe it was Elvis, but I was literally playing a single player game that he doesn't have, and I let him take over the game at certain points.
Right. But he's still sharing the screen, and that's what's interesting here with GameChat, where I'm like, oh, the fact that it's system level, and I sort of bought into their hype in the interview, starts to make sense. Is like, we can do that same thing, sort of. Like if you're in Breath of the Wild and I'm in Breath of the Wild and you're showing me where a Korok is, I can see both you and me. So I can keep going my way to find the Korok, and you could basically be guiding me your way, but I'm still playing and you're still playing. It's not you're taking over and I'm just watching you. We're
Yeah,
doing it
sure.
together,
Okay.
like a co-op experience.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But that's also that's where I still lean into. I don't necessarily know what baking it straight into Nintendo makes it any different from, hey, me and Elvis are going to Discord us playing the same single player game. No.
Right. No, and that's fair. I think two things separate it, maybe. And I'm not trying to say Nintendo has the silver bullet here. I just think the fact that it's console level, baked in, you don't need to make an account somewhere else. You don't need to do something else. You just turn it on the same device and just go. And you don't need to get headsets or accessories or go sit by a computer or whatever. It just go. Or plug into some third-party app. It just works. Is kind of like there's an ease of access there that might get people who are a little more casual players. You know, think of all the people that bought Animal Crossing and were showing off their islands and didn't buy a single game after that on Switch. Next Animal Crossing rolls around. There's stuff you can do when you visit people's islands, and there's stuff you can do on your own island. But what if you could, you know, like visiting islands was more limited. But what if you just screen shared your two islands side by side, and the two of you are just doing your own thing, but learning tips from each other as you go, like. For the random cozy gamer who doesn't want to necessarily get a Discord and set that all up, that seems like an interesting value proposition.
Yeah, to be
potentially.
fair, I feel like I know way too many people that are like my age and older, typically. Like, and we're talking people that play games but aren't necessarily super. Actually, I don't know. There are a couple that are very much as into gaming as I am, if not more. But that just refuse to, or just don't get Discord, and are just
it's like a commitment.
I mean,
for lack of
even
it's a
Jason was
light
like that to a certain
commitment.
extent. I think it's only because it was like almost by necessity that you like bothered with Discord.
To a degree, I mean, there is something to be said for like there is a friction point. Like one of the things I do with work all the time, because I work in online communities, is figuring out how to remove barriers of entry just to get someone to sign up for a forum, and add one extra field on a registration form, and your friction goes up, and it's a roadblock. People aren't going to bother.
Mm-hmm.
Take that field away, it's easier access. So this is kind of one of those situations, I think. And having the two games really side by side, I found they didn't show that well in the game chat part of the direct. That's where I feel the miscalculation was, is they kind of buried the lead on where this actually is unique compared to Discord. And you're right, they do need to show they have social features, but I feel like they buried that lead and they buried another lead. They mentioned it in passing, game share. So this is where things kind of get real interesting to me. It's the return of DS Download Play. Turns out, though, it works nothing like DS Download Play.
Oh, okay.
So
Because that was really exciting.
No, it's more exciting. So two things.
Oh, okay.
One, it works online, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
Two, you're not downloading a chunk of anything. They are, and I'm not making this up, this is really clever. They are retrofitting the Wii U gamepad technology to stream game content to other people, either locally or through the internet. Different feeds of the same game can be supported now through the essentially souped up Wii U gamepad tech. So again, Nintendo never gives up on an idea, right? So the gamepad streaming, now it's being used this way. And I'm proud to say, My idea when the C button leaked that you could cast your Switch 2 games wirelessly without
No,
the
you're
dock
still wrong. You are
ended
still
up-
wrong. You
No, hold on.
you
It
do not
ended
get
up-
credit for that. No,
It
absolutely
was
not.
true,
I refuse.
but not at all how I meant for it to be true. But it ended up being true in a totally different way. This is not all what I meant. I'm joking. I'm not actually taking credit. But I thought, yeah, this is a really clever use of existing technology they have. But what's cool about it is so you can stream your game to other people online. So the difference is, unlike GameChat, it's not system level. Game devs will need to bake in support for game stream or game share, individually. But if they choose to support it, you're beaming a chunk of a game to your friends that you can do multiplayer with. They don't need to download anything. They just, accept the game share or whatever. And then GameChat, which is also system level, will handle all the social side requirements. So suddenly you have this 1-2 punch on the Switch, on Switch 2, where
1-2 punch.
any game your friend, or 1-2, you have a 1-2 switch. But no, any game that supports this, you can just instantly not only play with your friends, but have all the social online play stuff baked in, ready to go. Very little work for the developers.
Their infrastructure better be.
Yeah, I know. That's my concern, because that frame rate on the screen shares in game chat. One, I admire that Nintendo was so open and showing how low frame rate it is, and then try and obscure that. But
you could count how many frames were
I
going
know,
by.
I know. And honestly, for most purposes, it's fine, right? If you're showing someone roughly what to do in a co-op experience, hey, here's how I get that Korok and Zelda. It doesn't need to be perfect. You just need the rough idea. But yeah, for game share, I imagine it's going to be a better stream. I imagine there's other bells and whistles. That was kind of the layman's terms they explained it in the Ask the Developer. But again, that seems like something really interesting that if Nintendo wasn't imagine a Zoom call, but it's games, and was talking about some of the deeper features, and that's really cool. I don't know. It just seems, and then the other piece of it that stands out from Discord to me is the whole camera. Not the camera. There's cameras and everything, but they have this thing called Camera Play, which is an API or whatever, and the accessory camera you can buy has technology, there are hook-ins you can do where it can actually sort of splice you out. So we saw it with Jamboree TV, the Mario Party Jamboree expansion that's going to be on Switch 2. They showed it with you're running game chat, it's doing its thing, or you're running camera play or whatever, and it can take your face in the living room, even if there's multiple people, and put your face on a floating avatar with your character. And it's as if you're doing that couch multiplayer thing that Nintendo loves so much and is so good at, but over the internet. It literally is moving your face around with your character. You're seeing the reaction when you get a start, takes over the screen in the background. It's really, on some level, it's silly, Kinect or iPlay type technology we've seen before, but Nintendo found a way to just make it another piece of this puzzle where it's everything you love about local multiplayer Switch is suddenly online with this game chat thing. So it's all very promising to me. But
I mean, maybe you
what
have
were you
an answer for this later, and if so, feel free to save it for later. But this tech that you're describing, though, while it is cool that they seem to be trying to bridge the gap between making online play feel like it's local, some of these games and some of these bonuses almost feel man, it'd be so cool if you could do this local, but it doesn't seem to have an option, seemingly.
Game share works
almost
locally.
No,
TV
almost specifically the camera stuff with Mario Party.
Oh, I don't know. I do know. Yes. Sort of. The mini games that use the camera can be played locally. They have them demoing at the experience where they have multiple people on a single game. I don't know if the floating avatar goes along for the ride, but definitely the mini game, the whole Jamboree TV mode, I think works locally. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be a huge miscalculation if not.
The Nintendo Switch Online stuff, kind of comes close because there have been plenty of times where we're oh man, we wish we could play the N64 game with 4 people locally, but I think we can only really max out at 2. But yeah,
and I do want to point out everything I've been saying and hyping up and buying into the propaganda of from their Ask the Developer interviews. It heavily relies on people wanting and needing and actually using this feature, and even just talking through it and reading about it, I'm starting to get more into the idea. But people have to buy in, and on the surface, it's not hugely different. They didn't show how it's hugely different. The first impression of those frame rates that we were talking about probably isn't a great first impression. It costs money it's behind a Switch Online paywall in 1 year. To, like, talk about brute forcing a value add to your subscription, but like to get mass adoption of this among Switch 2 owners is crucial, I think, or at least among your group of friends. And that's gonna be a bit of an uphill climb, and it might get underutilized because of that. Like, maybe kids will be super into it. Like, one of the things they noted in the Ask the Developer interview is how it recreates the feeling of being a live streamer. And there's all those surveys that have come out in the last few years of how like kids aspire, like the number one job they want is to be like a content creator or a live streamer. They want it more than being an astronaut. So like for kids, this is like a safe way to do that in their parents' eyes because it's just between friends and the parent has full control over how GameChat works and it still captures the vibe of being a streamer. So maybe among a certain age group, this could be popular, but like for older folks, for folks who use Discord, like it's an uphill battle. So like I could see this vision of like the student lounge of the Switch 2 where folks are just hanging out and doing their own gaming thing. Like it could catch on, maybe, but it's not as easy as just, you just hand a controller to someone, even though Nintendo's trying to make it as easy as you just hand a Joy-Con to someone by making it a button. Like there's still like social baggage that you have to overcome, you know what I mean? So that's going to maybe be the uphill battle for it. But I think the proposition there, what they're proposing is really interesting and very undersold in the direct. So yeah, that was the game chat thing I wanted to say. With or without game chat though, how are you guys feeling about like, I mean, we talked a little bit about the hardware and Kevin, you were saying you're impressed. Like, let's not talk game pricing per se. That's a whole nother conversation. But like, $450, you're getting the bigger Joy-Con, 7.9 screen, better graphic fidelity, 3D audio, 120 frames per second capability, HDR, docked 4K. To use an Angel term, is the yum to buck ratio good here? Like for a $450 Switch 2, $150 more than a standard Switch, $50 less than a default PS5 or Xbox Series X. Is that price point working for you guys?
All right. I feel like $50 less would have been the sweet spot for me. This feels like I'm still comfortable. This is like a price I'm comfortable paying day one. Yeah.
That's assuming it sticks, by the way. It could change because of the tariff stuff, but
that's assuming it sticks, because of the tariff stuff. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's what about you, Kevin?
Yeah, 400 definitely would have been the nice price.
I agree.
It's a fine, okay price. I'm not doing backflips for it, but yeah, it's a fair price, I feel like.
Yeah, I think I'm there with you. I mean, as a Nintendo guy, for me, it feels like such a huge jump in so many ways. Like obviously, I'm around gaming stuff. I've seen 4K. I've seen impressive graphics and all that. But like the type of experiences I play, suddenly leveraging all these effects and abilities, like it kind of blew me away more than I expected. Not so much in the Direct. Again, I feel like the Direct almost undersold things a little, like they did with Game Chat. But really, when I got up early those subsequent mornings and watched like the Treehouse Live 4K stream on my full size like 4K TV, and it was all in 4K, and we saw prolonged footage of like the details of Mario Kart. I mean, the face animations alone look great. The lighting effects in Donkey Kong Bonanza, really everything about Metroid Prime 4, what it was doing with its art style and leveraging those capabilities. Like, man, it's like all those console generations of Nintendo conditioning me to hand wave away the importance of graphics just kind of like melted away. Like I love the games regardless, but wow, was it cool to see my favorite franchises in like such a gorgeous presentation that goes notably above and beyond what Switch could do. So I was in my head, even before it was announced, I was like, even up to $500, maybe 400 was my sweet spot, but 450 plus then the next morning watching
we
all
all
that,
know there's
like,
no maybe.
Slam dunk. Yeah.
I feel like
you would have bought this thing if it was $600, Jason.
I should clarify my maybe.
I am very confident he would buy it if it was like $750.
Listen, when the tariffs hit,
at that price, he might just say like, "I'm not happy about this," but he'll still buy it.
Yeah, when the tariffs hit and it's $2,000, I'll still buy it. But my maybe was like, am I comfortable swallowing the pill or not? And like 500, like I would have not been mad about. 400 would have been great. I'll be annoyed, but still do it if it's like 600 after tariffs or 700. But like, yeah.
I don't know if I would have been mad with $500, but I definitely would have been like, that is a resounding absolute no. I am not buying this thing on launch.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're happy to take it to the suppository. But yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very curious how it's all going to shake out with the tariffs. But before we even get into anything like that, I did rattle off a bunch of games there. Maybe we should actually talk about the that side of the Switch 2 equation, which are the games. They showed a bunch in the direct. One thing of note, real quick to listeners, actually, as we transition over to the game side of things, we're going to have some much deeper impressions coming soon, or I will at least. As of right now, it's T-minus 4 days from getting to go hands-on at the Switch 2 experience when it comes to LA. And then we're going to have a special extra episode shortly after that to discuss my impressions and really just our collective deeper thoughts on each game. So this is really part one of the conversation. You know, what did we like? What did we dislike about the different games? And then we'll get a part two, if you will, in about a week's time. And if I may, before we really dive into each game,
Wow.
yes?
Oh no! Just
Was I, if you will, immediately into if I may? Yeah, if I may, I did want to talk a little bit about how they structured the direct, because I know, Kevin, you were saying you ought as well to kind of talk about the direct as a whole. So the bulk of this direct was the games, right? And they kind of had like multiple segments about different things. How did you feel about the direct overall, like the package of the presentation and all that jazz? Because I think that this is a good time to talk about before we get into the individual nitty-gritty games.
I thought it was good. It felt like they, there were definitely a lot of games, but a little something for everybody. I mean, I wasn't excited about every game, but every game did have like a like oh, so and so will care about this. Oh, so and so will care about that. There were plenty of Kevin must be very excited about this.
How many times did you send that in our group chat? Like 8?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many of those it was actually true for, but there were at least like Kevin coded games. Which there were a decent number of. I mean, yeah, there was. It was satisfying. Like it's one of those where I probably could have walked away only hearing about Donkey Kong, and I would have been happy. But the fact that Mario Kart is interesting because. Maybe we'll get into more later, but
maybe we hold on before you go too deep there.
Yeah, I'll just say initial impressions seem exciting. Outside of what I saw from the treehouse, that's probably all I'm going to see from it until it releases. Just because I do want to go in blind to this one compared to Mario Kart 8, but there were some things that did seem like, oh, I thought it was going to work like this. That's actually kind of disappointing, but
like what?
I'm sure it'll still be fun.
Let's talk about it. Like what? Go for it.
Let's
talk Mario Kart.
Okay.
Or if you guys prefer to go a different route, but now he's intrigued me.
No. I'll pin that. But
okay,
yeah,
we'll pin it.
Yeah,
okay.
And other than that, I mean, honestly, it's even hard for me to be like, it was just a good presentation. Like the fact we got a presentation a couple weeks before this, and
not even
they
6 days. 6 days.
However, like less than a week ago, that happened to announce my most anticipated game for like probably almost a decade. Makes all of these feel almost like oh wait, we had another oh that's neat. I got my Rhythm Heaven. Like I'm still like, it's like if someone fired a gun next to your ear, and I'm still like, hearing the ringing from Rhythm Heaven, and all this other stuff came out. That I'm like, oh, that sounds cool, but I'm still processing the fact that I'm getting Rhythm Heaven, so that's nice. I'll get excited about that later. But
Kevin, were you about to say something, Kevin?
About what?
The direct when Angel was talking.
Oh no.
Oh well, what did you think of the the direct as a whole, like the game shown, the structure of it? Like,
I don't really have much to say about the structure. Just overall, I thought this direct was the one that we had the week before. I thought was okay. I thought the Switch 2 direct was just straight up a 10 out of 10 direct. Probably their best in years, but that's obviously padded.
They're firing on all cylinders.
That's typically it is kind of padded just because, of course, it is in conjunction with just the full blow reveal of the Switch 2. Yeah. That being said, like even if this was a direct and the Switch 2 had already been out for a couple of years, I still would have thought that was a 10 out of 10 direct.
I mean, just the sheer amount of games in it. If you stop and count the games, like that was a lot, and it was a lot of like big, high-profile games. It wasn't, smaller fare. they had a story of seasons and stuff, but they also had like a cyberpunk. Like it was quite the breadth of variety. I agree, especially on the third party front. I keep asking you guys about structure because I had a thought about structure. I thought they very cleverly structured how they rolled out the games in the Direct. Like the Direct had a lot of games, and as we've been talking about, a big part of the whole Switch 2 sales pitch is that it's not just a new platform with new games, but this continuation of the original Switch. I mean, that was one of the selling points that you were saying, Angel, at the top, is like this is just more Switch, right? And it's like it's not intended doing a generational reset. It's more of like an iPhone-style upgrade, or as we learned rather quickly from the Switch 2 editions, maybe more in line with like what we've been seeing with Xbox or PlayStation, where they kind of bridge their generations, which for Nintendo is a new approach. So what I think was kind of smart about the structure of the Direct is how they chose to sort of present these three different like software-based bridges, if you will, into like the Switch 2 ecosystem. So the first 15, 20 minutes of games was really catering to like existing Switch owners. It felt like Switch 1 owners in particular. Like it isn't not a huge surprise that they would cater to them. There's 150 million of them out there with Nintendo accounts and libraries already at the ready. But I thought it was really clever, although not surprising, that they so clearly targeted that audience before anyone or anything else. Like first game shown, Mario Kart World. That's 67 million people that own Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, that they're kind of right out the gate like, hey, look at what this Mario Kart experience is that you can only get on Switch 2, and here's why you need to jump over. And then very quickly they pivoted into other Switch 1 games that owners have already showed they love getting a big step up on Switch 2. Like not sequels, but literally the games and series that you likely own because they're some of Switch's best sellers in their own right. Zelda, Mario Party, Kirby. They showed how those games in your library right now become better on Switch 2 with the Switch 2 editions. And then from there, they brought in this like second bridge where they switched over to attracting folks who are perhaps playing games on other platforms as well as maybe on Switch before. They really doubled down on like the third party support. They had 2 waves of announcements across the Direct to try and cover like all sorts of bases. You want massive sprawling third party showcases. Here's Elden Ring and Cyberpunk. You want new third-party blockbusters that are already a hit. Here's Split Fiction. You want sports games. EA's back with FC, and Madden's back on Nintendo platforms. You want JRPG. Square Enix has you covered on both fronts. If you like Nintendo platform ones, here's a Bravely Default remaster. And you know what? If you like the bigger stuff, here's Final Fantasy VII Remake. Like they really were trying. You're a fighting game fan? Street Fighter 6 is here, just like Street Fighter 4 was at the 3DS launch. Like it really felt like they were trying to hit like every angle, and even the partnership stuff. They were doing partnerships with other studios as kind of like, well, if you like the work of these studios, you're really going to want to get Switch 2, because where else are you going to get From Software's new game, The Darkbloods, only on Switch 2? Where else are you going to get the next big like Warriors? Isn't it Darkbloods?
The Duskbloods.
It's just
Duskbloods. Thank you. Yeah. But, my point is, you get what I'm saying. Like, can't believe I botched that, guys. I'm just going to hang up the podcasting coat. But no, it was just like, felt a lot like they were trying to hit every angle. And then only after they talked to all those audiences about what Switch 2 offers, only after those huge pitches were they then by the way, here's the exclusive content we will be making as Nintendo. And that's when they showed Kirby Air Riders. That's when they showed DK Bananza. Great name, by the way. And that's kind of where they wrapped it. But it just the pacing of it and kind of like expanding outward, I thought was really smart. So yeah, those were a bunch of the games I just rattled off, but let's actually talk about some of them. Angel, you had a pin in Mario Kart World. Let's unpin it. What were you guys say before?
I think it was how it was initially pitched as like, oh, drive everywhere, but then it's like, but not really. Like, I think it's mainly the. Oh, go for it.
What do you mean, not really?
What?
I guess there's just a couple like contingencies. I guess like
okay.
mainly for the Grand Prix. Like it doesn't work.
I know where you're going with this.
Like exactly like how I thought it was gonna work. Like understandably, but like and obviously this is one of those things where it's like, oh, maybe I just have to play it. But like after seeing how a Grand Prix actually works, the only thing I felt was like, man, this just feels like it just adds more padding to the Grand Prix, and I spend less time in the actual tracks. Because essentially, what happens is whatever the first track is of the 4, you do 3 laps there, And then after you do 3 laps, you like the race ends, it waits for everyone to finish, and then you get a transition to the in between trial, just the road to the next track. And then, 3, 2, 1, you're racing, and then you're driving to the next track. And I didn't realize that was going to take up 2 laps of the next course. So, which makes sense. I guess they don't want you to, do this thing and then do 3 laps and then do another thing and then do 3 laps. But these other tracks are like really nice looking that by the time you get there, you just do 1 lap. And I thought like, oh, it was over already. Like I felt like it was just getting started because there was just so much straightaway.
Sure, that's how that works. Because you can also skip the drive in between. So what happens then?
No, well, that's that's how the Grand Prix works. That's just how that one works.
No, you can literally skip the drive in between. That's what I'm saying. You don't have to
in Grand Prix
straight to each track. Yeah.
I mean, it must be a separate mode, but like this is literally how it is. Like part of the 3 laps is incorporated into the drive in between section. So it's like 3 laps on the first track.
We'll find out on Friday because that's when I'll play it. But I'm
sure.
I mean, to brag. But,
honestly, like it would make sense that they have an option to make it more standard, but that is just like how that option works, like the drive in between.
I'll have to listen to what Kind of Funny said about, because they did mention something about it working similar to what Angel's saying.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I was literally watching them play, and that's just how it was. It just made the races on the actual tracks feel very short and just a lot of like straightaway. Nothing necessarily wrong with the straightaway, it's pretty straightaway, but yeah, I like some of those tracks. Some of those tracks can get really creative, like in Mario Kart 8, where they're just like not 3 laps, just one giant track.
Yeah, you don't want every track to be Mount Wario.
Yeah, and this just makes it feel like everything is just Mount Wario with the occasional sprinkling of like, here's a little lap. Because then when you get to the next area, you finish the lap, and then you get another transition to the next straightaway. So basically, it has to keep stopping everybody because, and that makes sense because otherwise, and actually this is already kind of a problem. Like the people in first place would just get way more further in first place. Like basically the good people are just going to get way further ahead. It's going to be even more impossible to catch up if there wasn't like a hard stop where they didn't essentially reset and go like, okay. Now we're all going to start relatively close to each other again. Because imagine like some people get so good that they're going to be like in, we'll say the 3rd course by the time I'm still like on the 2nd course. And then it's just like, what's the point at that point? Mm-hmm. But that's that Grand Prix. The other one that did seem a little more interesting, but is still more straightaways is the knockout mode, which that one actually is more like what I thought was advertised, which is 4 races or basically 4 tracks, but it's one continuous super mega long track that never stops.
It's like those arcade racers from the 90s. Yeah,
exactly. But those are just the straightaway parts. So you're never like really driving into the track and doing like a lap around the track. You're basically just like driving up to the next like milestone, but then you're just continuing straight through the next in between. You're basically just going in between track to in between track, skipping like the loop-de-loop parts or like the parts where you would do like the lap, which
right,
I guess is fine.
Also, you're absolutely right. I did some Googling while we were chatting. What you're saying is true. I don't know how I misinterpreted that. Maybe I got confused because there is an option that people have found that you can do standard 3 laps, but no one knows
which makes
no
sense.
Like,
I mean, like,
enable it yet, but it exists.
Because presumably these connections are not, they're obviously not like randomized. Like it takes a lot of work to make these transitions like work. So I'm sure they're like hard set from like, because they have the map of the world. I'm sure they only have so many ways they can connect to each other, because that seems to be like the way that they're going.
Well,
so it would either be that
free
or
roam where everything just lets you go any which way. But
but what I'm saying is like that beach track is always going to be in the southeast. Like they're all going to be like locked into a certain area. So the Grand Prix and the knockout races are always going to be. They're always going to have that same order, is what I'm saying. Like there is like a finite order, which
does then make a
at one hand, like you guys to start is cool, but Yeah, but ultimately, like that is the part that if I could see myself eventually getting worn on and just defaulting to regular Mario Kart, which is probably just gonna be like, cool, let's just do 3 laps of a randomized track, cool, next randomized track, cool, next randomized track. Just because it's like, okay, here's the next Moo Moo Meadows to San Francisco to, Mount Wario, like track
Yeah.
again. Because it's always gonna be those 3 or those 4. Like, I'm sure they have like
So then,
maybe
yeah,
some
and then
variation, but yeah.
ultimately it
So,
would become like, do you play a Mount Wario style track or do you play a standard normal 3-lap situation? You just choose
yeah,
between them
which,
depending on your mood. Yeah.
the game looks like it at least has like enough variety within the track itself to allow for some flexibility, which is cool. Like a lot of it does seem really fun, and I know it will be fun for a while. But eventually, and I'm mainly speaking for myself and people that play Mario Kart like me, like we'll eventually find the optimal line. There's eventually, and just like in Mario Kart 8, there's eventually going to be paths that you just never take, because why would you ever take that if you're trying to win? And eventually, like it gets normal, and you're just trying to optimize that, which is fine. But then a lot of that other stuff just kind of ends up feeling like it's getting in the way, which is why I actually do appreciate that there is just a free roam mode, which is kind of nice, just a nice little change of pace.
There's
But
some other
but the wall riding, the grinding, like that does allow for a lot of like just fun moments. I mean, sometimes you will be forced to take non-optimal routes just for the sake of keeping your momentum, which is cool. And it definitely looks like they made an effort to keep momentum at a higher rate. Like in Mario Kart 8 and Wii, like if you get hit by a shell or anything really, you almost come to a complete stop. And in this one, you just lose some speed, but you still like kind of keep going,
and
which
randomly
is
land on
definitely
your
very
head,
different
which
from Mario
looks
Kart.
super cartoony.
Yeah, that seems to happen if you try to use like the super
Yeah.
feather, right?
The whole
People seem
thing's
to keep
way
trying.
more like cartoony and playful than
Yeah,
before.
which is cool, and I'm looking forward to
Even the
honestly
little
like
text
it's.
boom and stuff came back from Mario Kart 64. I noticed.
I will give it that like it is a lot more interesting, and there is a lot to discover than compared to what like the initial, like when it was literally just a teaser and all we had going was potentially 24 people. Like I still think the 24 people is like the least interesting part, except I guess
I agree.
it makes the most sense in the knockout mode. That's the only way that would be fun, if you have like enough people to make that last a little while. But I'm very much looking forward to it. I feel like it has enough differences and things to set it on its own that I'm still looking forward to it. And Sonic Crossworlds, which it's funny that one, is leaning in on the randomization of it, because the first lap is whatever stage you land on. The second lap is some random stage chosen by whoever is in first place, because they get the choice of 3, like 2 that they can see or wild card. And then third lap is back in the original stage, but altered. So I don't know. They both have really interesting
similar
qualities,
issue
so.
or similar idea of moving past just a standard 3-lap format.
Yeah, except Sonic's has the potential to like become stale way. It has less of the potential to become stale because of the fact that it's always going to be potentially different, like just by default of that second lap mechanic. But yeah.
I can't believe I missed how the Grand Prix structure was, and I was watching the Treehouse Live. I was so fixated on look at the cartoon boom, look at
I had to rewind it because
notice the structure. Yeah,
I had to rewind it because I was like getting ready to like, I want to just look at the details, but then it was already like, wait, why are we fading out? Like, I thought we just got here, and they're like, we're moving on.
Can you
already?
imagine if I like went to play it and I didn't know this was the case, and I'm just like, what? Like I'm playing
like, is this the demo version?
Yeah, like what's going on? Yeah.
So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It just like the way they presented it gave me different expectations than what it was. And then it just made me think about like more the downsides of doing this in the long run, because, I played Mario Kart 8 for thousands of hours between 8 and Deluxe. So, and the fact that there's a lot of randomization definitely helps with that. So if you're stringing packages of tracks together, that might not help. But
they all still work solo. They just would be lapped. But yeah, I'm I'm very intrigued about what they haven't shown because they're doing this whole Mario Kart Direct in a couple weeks. And I know you're going to skip it, so we won't talk about it too much on the podcast, but I have a sneaking suspicion there's a lot more to the open world free roam mode. I mean, they're hinting. Bill Trennan in an IGN interview straight up hinted this, but I think we're getting like a Diddy
Bill Trennan's still with
Racing.
Nintendo?
Yeah, he's still there. He's a VP now. But I'm guessing we're getting a whole...
Yeah, I was hoping he was doing well. Hopefully he's eating well.
Yeah, so is his fellow treehouser from his era, Nate Bildorf, is also a VP now. He runs the treehouse.
Nate Bildorf is still there?
Yeah, and he runs the treehouse. He did an
I don't know
interview
who
with
that is,
Nintendo
though.
Life today.
I knew you didn't. I knew you were just.
Should I know who Nate Bildorf? I feel like I would remember
he
the
wrote
last name
he wrote all the
Bildorf.
early Mario and Luigi RPGs and Paper Mario. He's the head localization for them.
Dang, I know for a fact you have talked about the writer of Mario and Luigi.
Yeah, right now, 10 seconds ago, I did. but no, the point is, what I was getting at is Bill Trannan's been hinting that there's a whole another part of Mario Kart they haven't revealed yet, and I'm thinking Diddy Kong Racing style adventure mode or some super elaborate mission mode. I missed how the structure worked, but I picked up little nuggets. During the Treehouse Live, they showed you getting an achievement. There's this whole new system as well where you collect burgers, like roadside Route 66 burger joint burgers as you drive, and they give you new costumes to unlock, and you change into some on the fly while driving. Like there's a lot of like things to collect and do, and we're kind of missing the glue of all those right now. We know all the bits and pieces, but what's like the thing that binds it all together? So that I think we're going to learn in a couple weeks. And as long as they give you options and menus, hey, if you want to play 3 laps, play 3 laps. If you want to do Grand Prix, do Grand Prix. If you want to do the crazy, like, what if the 3D Mario platformer that launches with Switch 2 is actually Mario Kart, except you're driving instead of platforming? Like, that's not the case. But, there's a lot here, I feel like. So it'll be interesting. And we'll get to the price of it a little later, because that's another big point of conversation. But were there any other games we wanted to talk about besides Mario Kart?
I mean,
do you want to talk about Duskbloods?
Yeah, I want to talk about Duskbloods. I'm conflicted on Duskbloods. Obviously, I'm excited for a new FromSoft game.
Yeah, should we zoom out real quick for folks who aren't familiar with what's going on? It's From Software. It's an
exclusive From Software game.
Yes,
the developers
published by
of
Nintendo.
Elden Ring, the Souls games, developers of my favorite game of all time, Bloodborne. This is the part of the Direct where I actually woke up because I completely forgot that the Direct was happening.
And you thought it was all a dream?
And I pull up my phone. I wake up to 57 texts from these two yahoos that had been going on since 6 a.m.
Oh yeah, I got up at 5:45 that day.
And I was like, "Oh, the Direct's on," but I didn't say anything. And then I started watching, and I forgot at what point in the Direct I started watching. But then, this trailer for the Duskbloods started, and I was like, what is this? It's sort of this. It had this like gothic Victorian feel, and then the FromSoft logo pops up, and that's when I texted these guys, "No f***ing way," because I think rightfully, and a lot of the internet rightfully thought, "Holy crap! Is the Switch 2 going to have Bloodborne 2?"
Yeah,
because Bloodborne 2 is a video game that we've all been clamoring for. Well, Bloodborne fans have been clamoring for. Either Bloodborne 2, a remaster, a 60 frame per second patch, a PC port, something. And so seeing this gothic Victorian trailer start showing up on Switch of all places,
yeah,
it got a lot of the internet in a tizzy, we'll say, including myself. Turns out it's not a Bloodborne sequel. It looks more like a spiritual successor more than anything. Turns out the Duskbloods is a PvP VE, so a player versus environment game. Not dissimilar to the Elden Ring spin-off that's coming out in a couple of months, Elden Ring Night Rain. Except that one isn't actually player versus player. That's more of a... Wait, is it player versus player? I don't remember.
Is
Yeah, I think that's more
Miyazaki directing that one too?
No, Miyazaki's not directing that one, which makes
Alright,
the
'cause he's directing
Duskbloods.
this one.
Yeah, because he's directing
Yeah.
this one. So while some of the teams split off to do Night Rain, it seems like Miyazaki is directing this game. Well, it's not. It doesn't seem he is directing this game, which is huge. The last time that Miyazaki directed a non-exclusive game was Bloodborne, and so some of my conflict lies in something that they have already squashed, where they said, "Hey, don't worry, we know that our single player games are our jam, our Elden Ring, our Dark Souls, that is our thing, and we're not moving away from that." Even though our next two games are, cooperative, multiplayer oriented games.
Was it Armored Core? Wait, that one did have a campaign, right? I just feel like
It
I only
does.
know it as like the multiplayer
it's a
thing.
campaign.
Mhm.
I would love if
Mhm.
Armored Core games would switch too. Just throwing it out there if you're listening from software. Or
No,
Big Kados, where they cut their teeth.
Would you
Bring
love?
it on over.
You would love it for other people, not for yourself, right?
I would love the concept of it being there because I like mech games. Custom Robo makes me like all mech games. So I play them, different stories.
Well, they
but
did
I like
announce
the
that
idea.
new. I don't know if it's a sequel to Machine X Machina or what's it called?
Yeah, Daemon X Machina.
Demon X Machina. Yeah.
Gibberish subtitle. Like, I forget the name of it. Something Nightmare. Yeah, Daemon X Machina, when I played the demo on Switch 1, it was kind of cool, but felt a little like held back by the Switch. So maybe the sequel will be good. Yeah, I just like the idea of mech games. And if Armored Core comes to Switch and does well, that opens up the floodgates for others. Like I said, Nintendo might see it and go Custom Robo. And I love Custom Robo. So
Sure.
that's why I want it on Switch, to be honest.
But
Yeah.
no, I only say that because I know you would not survive that game.
there's
a
way-
lot. That game
Yeah,
is
no,
is
It's way too.
so difficult.
There's too many layers. Yeah,
no,
there's too
it's not
much
even
going
layers.
on.
It's just the difficulty of that game is insane. It's much harder than I think any of the Souls games.
Oh wow, then yeah, no, zero chance for me. but
No, where
conceptually,
where my conflict lies is the fact that it is a Switch 2 exclusive, mainly because I just want to play it on PC.
Mm.
But that's really about it. It'll be interesting. It's definitely exciting, another Miyazaki game. Miyazaki games are always going to turn out great. But I can't really go
was
off
gonna say,
more of
yeah, go
what that trailer gave off, except like, hey, this might be something along the lines of a Bloodborne,
I would check out if you haven't yet. I'm all about these things they released after the direct. There's something called Creator's Voice that Nintendo's doing on a weekly basis with different major third-party developers, like the figureheads of them. The first one is with Miyazaki. That's where he made the comment that they're still making for single-player games. But it's basically a written interview, or in some cases maybe a video interview, where they talk about the game. For Duskbloods, it's like a 3-page interview. They talk about how it's like an 8-player experience, how you're kind of going to find like the first bloods, whatever that is, at the start of each challenge. And it kind of dives into it. So if you haven't checked it out, or anyone listening, it might give you a better sense of kind of what to expect. One thing I thought was interesting is they started this project on Switch 1, and then they switched it to Switch 2 when they heard about some of the more advanced online plans for things like GameChat. So again, Nintendo bearing the GameChat lead. They're like, look, we made chat. And it's like, oh, actually, you made something that like Miyazaki's like, let's get our game on that one instead of the original one. I'm sure also because of specs, but I like to think GameChat, the cute little GameChat solely got this very gothic game onto Switch 2. But yeah, you should check it out. It has more information on the game. So,
Yep.
Also, Kevin, you're in good company. I was reading, like, again, it was Interview Palooza today. Doug Bowser was speaking with the Washington Post, NOA President Doug Bowser, and he said that his son behaved very much like you did. You didn't enter our text chat until this popped up, and you're like, what? And Doug Bowser, I almost call him Dick Bowser, Doug Bowser's son texted him, what was that? Exclamation mark, question mark, the second it aired on the stream. So you're in good company. You, Bowser Jr., literally, and you.
Nope, don't call me that, especially after his comments.
No, you're
today.
not Bowser Jr. No, Bowser Jr. and you are two people who loved it, is what I said. You're not Bowser Jr., don't worry. But yeah, so that's Duskbloods. Does anyone want to talk about DK Bananza at all?
I don't really have much, unfortunately, to talk about. It looks cool, and that's all I can really say.
That is fair. I have a few scattered thoughts. This one's definitely one that I want to like dive into more when I have impressions, but a couple scattered thoughts. Great name. great amount of puns in it throughout, if you watch the footage. And I sort of said this earlier in the show, but I just wanted to kind of reiterate it. I thought it's really interesting that they're basically Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdoming like a traditional 3D platformer structure, where instead of it
I'm
being
out.
like, what?
I'm out.
Okay. It's not to the extent.
You Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom a game for me, and that I'm out.
So nowhere
I
near
would
the
say it's
same
more
level.
Odyssey than anything.
So here's why I say it.
Hey, now you recaught my attention. Okay,
So
Because
here's
it's
why I'm
literally just
saying-
like find the golden bananas hidden throughout the world, and
I'm
they
also
literally
I'm also
different.
joking,
are also.
by the way.
Yeah, no, yeah.
It also looked
No,
like the gold are also named just like in Odyssey as well. Like, oh, you found the banana hidden in the cart.
I mean,
Banana
it has to be
hidden
the
in
same developers, right? Like Nintendo's being really weird about developers still, and they're like, "We're not going to tell you yet."
God, I hate that so much.
But I know. Bill Trent in an interview today said they will, when the time's right, actually reveal it this time. So there's that. But like, it
Do other
feels like it's
companies
the Odyssey
do that?
team. No,
No.
Nintendo's trying to do this thing where they're just this like blank slate of
Yeah,
like
we are Nintendo, and that's
Everything
it.
we put out is of equal quality. And frankly, it's not. So I feel like you should really tout the fact that if it is the 3D Odyssey team, that they're doing it. And by knowing it's the 3D Odyssey team, that also helps set expectations of what type of game it is when the next, 3D Mario may be. I've seen some people sort of half seriously speculate it could be Next Level Games making this under like the supervision of someone else. So maybe that means a new 3D Mario is coming sooner. But by not telling us who's making it, there's always question marks. But the thing I was getting at with the structure of it that I thought was interesting is, one, there's a very big sense of verticality to this game that kind of reminds me of Tears of the Kingdom a little. But the reason it also reminds me of Tears of the Kingdom is in Odyssey and other 3D platformers, for a large part of the game, it's very like, I don't want to say curated, because this one still is, but like you will find the secret of the thing in the place that they want you to find it through the method of how they want you to find it. This one, you can like just destroy stuff. You can just take a rock and chuck it and punch the ground and just kind of terraform your way through a level. So you can choose to pick route A to find the secret, or you can like back channel your way some other way to find the secret. And that feels a little more free form and kind of how like Zelda went from here's a dungeon with a specific path to here's a dungeon where you kind of forge your own way, that I thought was reminiscent. So I'm very excited to try it. I just thought that was kind of interesting. And the game looks great. And I like DK's redesign. He's so expressive now. Yeah, I'm excited for it. And the fact that it comes out in July is great. So I think the first party output in this presentation with, even with them teaming up with Miyazaki and doing stuff with From Software, like it was a really strong, the Kirby Air Riders surprise was a nice surprise as well, even though we know nothing about it. The one game, Welcome Tour. Can we talk about Welcome Tour? Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. This thing screams packing.
The should have been packing, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I watched the part of it in the Treehouse Live, and I will say, if you're like into like a bit nerdier about like wanting to know the inner workings of the Switch and how things work and how things come together, like it's kind of a neat, if not sterile, approach to introducing you to some of the system. Like you're in this museum essentially, and you're going to these different exhibits, which are basically interactive demos. And they have some clever ones they showed where like some are kind of kitschy. There's one where it's like, identify the frame rate. Not kidding. That's a real one. But then they have a kind of clever one where they show you what Mario 1-1 from the first Mario game, World 1-1, looks like at an actual 256 by 256 pixels, but now you're on a 4K TV. And then you play through the game in this tiny little window, because that's what the pixels are these days. And as you're playing, the level scrolls, and before you know it, you have the entirety of World 1-1 across your single TV screen that never scrolled. And it's just kind of a really cool visual way to see how technology's advanced. So like the idea of this being like a visitor center or a museum for your new Switch 2, where you can go and check these things out and learn some of the inner workings and play silly little games like that or silly demos like that. That's neat. What's not neat is exactly what you said, Angel. I don't understand why this thing costs money.
It sounds like this could have been renamed like Nintendo Virtual Museum, and then they could slowly just add different like console exhibits.
Right,
and, like,
different exhibits.
And they're like,
Yeah.
this month you could get the N64 and everything about it, and
That'd be so cool. I
Kirby
would
3D
love
demo,
that.
or
That's a
Super
brilliant
Nintendo,
idea.
the Super Nintendo wing, or that'd be awesome. That I could see
you imagine?
justify paying for just because of the potential that's going to grow into all this other stuff instead of just a really neat instructional manual. But
Yeah, like could you and that's the thing is this does go like Nintendo claims and bits and pieces we saw in Treehouse Live and stuff. This seems to go beyond just instruction manual in that there's like I guess medals to earn and like things to do to get high scores but I don't understand how you have something like Astro's Playroom on PS5 for free and you look at that as Nintendo and you go, what if like that but like less but like costs you?
And that wasn't the more expensive console too.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me. Exactly, it's a more expensive console.
I mean,
and to be
that's
fair,
got to be a power move if I've ever seen one.
And to be fair, they charged what $60 for 1-2 Switch, and that was pretty much tech demos under different guides. And this honestly looks a little more interesting than 1-2 Switch in a lot of ways. But
but also,
again, how do you charge?
Because you're Nintendo and you know that people are gonna pay the $10 the same way that me and you and Angel bought 1-2 Switch for $60.
I never bought 1-2 Switch, for the record.
What?
Believe it or not, I never bought it. Yep.
Wow.
I knew I'd play it at
Never
Angel's.
mind.
Wow.
That said,
It's me and Angel that are enabling this goddamn company.
I will be buying.
Well, I learned my
I'm gonna be
lesson
honest,
because
I
I
will
am
be
not buying this.
Yeah,
so.
right.
I will be buying this.
Except
we're
I
switching.
do not regret the 1-2 Switch purchase, for the record.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
always
I don't
fun
think-
one time with every new group of people.
So
And
we
to be
got like a
fair-
good 2 or 3 times out of that game.
Yeah, so like to 4 people, you should.
But listen,
to
man,
be fair,
that's an
be
average
fair,
about like
that's 3 more people
$15
than I would've.
$15
Yeah.
an experience. Okay.
that's still $5
Hey,
more
man.
than Welcome Tour. But
Hey, man, yeah, like introducing someone to cow milking and like never gets old.
to be
Unless,
fair, the
well,
whimsy
introducing
of
them,
1-2
it's just a
Switch
shame
is
that
good.
those.
Hold on. I need a drink if I want to continue talking this because I just realized the atrocities I've done to the game community by purchasing that goddamn game.
Well, here's the thing. While you're getting your drink, I think honestly it was NOA that was holding back everything costing money back in the day. Like 1-2 Switch cost $60. That's one of the first examples of like maybe Reggie not having as much sway, even though he was still there. And like if you go back to the Wii days, like in Japan, Wii Sports was a separate release you had to pay for. And I remember reading in Reggie's book, and other people brought this up online in the last few days, but in Reggie's book, he talks about how he convinced Nintendo Japan to make Wii Sports a pack-in because it's a great way to showcase the Wii, and it was crucial to understanding the Wii that it be packed in. Welcome Tour, I feel like if there's a Reggie-type figure at Nintendo still, would have been a pack-in if he was there. But because he's not, and Nintendo has this firm belief that everything they make offers value that should be paid for, that's how we got here. But I would also, in Nintendo's defense, say you don't need a Wii Sports for the Switch 2.
Yeah,
like
correct.
not saying they should charge for this, but yeah, this is a very different. Same with 1-2 Switch. You didn't necessarily need the stuff that they put on the Switch, and the stuff that they're putting on Switch 2 is not so revolutionary that you don't understand how it works, and you need something baked in to teach you. So if there was ever a time for Nintendo to get greedy, Welcome Tour is a better time than Wii Sports would have been. And while I still don't want to pay $10, and I know I'll pay $10, like it, in the grand scheme of things, this does make more sense than previous pack-ins. This makes more sense than Face Raiders if they charged for Face Raiders. Like Face Raiders wouldn't be a charge experience on 3DS. It's supposed to show off the AR, but there's nothing Welcome Towards doing that's really showing you something you haven't experienced before. It's just prettying it up in a weird museum way. I really think, actually, Angel, your idea of if they expand it to be a full virtual Nintendo museum would be super cool. They could sync it up with new additions to Switch Online. They could do special exhibits for new games coming out. Like that would have been really awesome. But I think Nintendo's caught between a rock and a hard place where they probably know themselves that not a lot of people are going to buy this thing, but they don't want to put that much dev resource into that many things that would be free because they're getting a little greedy now. So that's kind of it's like Welcome Tour just kind of falls through the cracks of like not having a good fit, I guess. But it should have been free. It should have been free as well. Like surface level, it should have been free. That's kind of where I land on it. I mean,
I don't think there's a single person except the ultimate Nintendo fanboy who doesn't think that they shouldn't have been free.
Yeah. And and again, it's crazy to me that like, if the writing is so clearly on the wall, why would they try and try it? They're going to sell fewer copies of it this way and have fewer people experiencing it and have a more sour taste in people's mouths because of it, when compounded with all the other price stuff they're doing, than if they just made it free. Like, take the hit for it's a PR win to make it free. That will help you in the longer term. But I guess they just want the shorter term money from the, 200,000 of us like me that will pay for it. I don't know.
What if this was also the PR move? Say that we're going to charge $10 so that then we could say, hey, look, we're no longer charging you for it.
I had that tinfoil hat theory, conspiracy theory that some of the prices they've been doing, especially with like Welcome Tour, are loose pricing. Like, I don't think Mario Kart's going to change in price, which we'll get to. I don't think the Switch hardware's going to change in price. But, I mean, everyone knew there were tariffs coming. Nintendo says, we're going to talk about it later, but Nintendo says they didn't factor tariffs into the price. I don't entirely believe that. And I do think that there were some value propositions that they're playing a little fast and loose with. And that's why maybe we didn't see some pricing for some stuff. And this may be one of them. And the fact that they buried the news of its price being $10 in a random IGN interview is... it feels like they were kind of testing the waters a little. Like, if people were into it, I could easily see them being like, actually, it's $15. So like, there's a lot of, I think there's some dancing around it. I think that's also why we haven't talked about, but Dragon Drive, the dual mouse Joy-Con mouse game. I think the fact that they're not telling us much of anything about it, even though it's coming this summer, it's coming within a couple months of Donkey Kong, which we know a ton about. I think it's they're doing like a bit of a live market research thing. Like, it kind of reminds me of like when they announced Blast Ball and then later they're like, oh, actually it's Metroid Blast Ball. And obviously it was always Metroid Blast Ball, but they were like kind of drip feeding to get a sense of interest, and then they packed it in with Federation Force. And something about Dragon Drive just feels like a bit of like they're kind of testing some waters as well. Like, I don't know, is it going to be like a $30 game? Does it have much to it? Is it multiplayer only? Who knows? But the fact that they're just kind of like, look at this little experience. It's kind of like ARMS, but like we stripped out a bunch of the personality. Like, I'm curious what that's going to be in a similar way that I think they're kind of playing with Welcome Tour. So we'll see. But I'll be buying. Angel, you ruined it for me. I love the idea of a Nintendo Museum so much that now, like, whatever Welcome Tour is and whatever depth it may actually have beyond what we're thinking, it's not going to be enough. So thank you, Angel.
You're welcome.
While we are there any other games you wanted to talk about specifically, guys?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay. I mean, we'll have another episode in like a week where we can pick back up with any. So I do have a couple nitpicks about the lineup. And I'm sure you guys may too, but if I may, let me sort of set the stage by first saying that Nintendo is very closely matching how Switch One's launch year saw a new first-party game every month. But let me rattle off what we're getting with Switch 2 and see if you can maybe spot where I'm going with this. So, at launch, we're getting Mario Kart World and the paid Welcome Tour digital download, as we just talked about. That's in June. Then in July, we get Donkey Kong Bonanza and Super Mario Party Jamboree plus Jamboree TV. Then in August, we get Kirby and the Forgotten Land plus Starcross Worlds. In September, it's currently TBD, but Dragon Drive that we were just talking about, is planned for sometime in summer. It would slot in nicely in September. That gives them as much dev time as they can possibly get while staying in that window. October, maybe Metroid Prime 4, maybe Kirby Air Riders. November, whichever one of those isn't in October, plus Pokemon ZA as probably the flagship holiday game, given it's dated late 2025. And then December, possibly Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, which is the only game labeled specifically Winter 2025 that we saw so far. So, that's the list. Here's where my concern lies. Very few of those games are first-party developed titles that are ground up for the Switch 2. Mario Kart, Donkey Kong, Welcome Tour. That's it. Metroid Prime 4 looks incredible in the Switch 2 edition, obviously also coming to Switch. Mario Party's Jamboree TV and Kirby Starcross Worlds, they're basically DLC. I'm sure they'll be fun, but they're basically DLC. And both Hyrule Warriors and Kirby Air Riders, while Switch exclusives published by Nintendo, are collabs with outside studios, respectively Koei Tecmo doing Hyrule Warriors and Masahiro Sakurai, who's directing Air Riders, just recently confirmed Bandai Namco is doing the development. The same group in Bandai Namco that did Smash Ultimate, actually. So the question becomes, what's Nintendo themselves cooking up that leverages Switch 2 from the ground up after the first month of the console's existence? We literally don't know a single game. And I just find that really interesting. Like, we know up through mid-July. And that's it. Like, it made the presentation initially feel kind of light on like true first-party offerings, even though if you sit and count them out like I just did, there's actually still a ton to play. It's just weird because it's probably the last thing I expected to be my takeaway from the Direct. Yet here we are not knowing what Nintendo themselves are making for their new console, really. It's a question mark you don't like ever get with a new Nintendo console generation. And it's ironic because of something you said before, Angel, which is that we had that Switch 1 presentation a week prior. And in that, we got 2 separate 2026 games confirmed from first-party Nintendo. I mean, there's a lot in that Direct that was kind of surprising. We got PlayStation IPs coming to Switch. We have Patapon and Everybody's Golf, both courtesy of Bandai Namco. Yeah, that was cool, but really random. But more significantly for this conversation, Nintendo tips its hand, and we know Rhythm Heaven Groove is coming, and we know Tomodachi Life, Living the Dream, first new Tomodachi Life in over a decade, God, we're old, is also coming. But it's just so interesting to me that we're at this inflection point for Nintendo where they have to offer more reassurance to 150 million Switch owners that first-party content is still coming. Yet for potential Switch 2 buyers, it's kind of just like, well, obviously we'll have more. We're just not going to tell you anything, which is not how I recall them ever launching a console. So I don't know. It just strikes me as kind of like funny almost that we're in this situation because it really speaks to how differently they're handling this generational transition. And surely, you know, I should be fair. We're going to end up getting Switch 2 editions of Rhythm Heaven Groove and Tomodachi Life, I'm sure. In fact, Angel, you and I, we were spitballing what Rhythm Heaven Groove Switch 2 edition may entail and landed on kind of a wild but maybe obvious idea. Do you want to retell what we were thinking?
Like, isn't Groove a 2026 title?
It is. That's my point. It's only on Switch 1 as of right now.
Yeah, it's coming out so deep into just like Switch 2, I guess Switch 2 existence that, like, also just like going by the name, like going from Megamix to, or the Best Plus in Japan to Groove, like, I don't want to say it sounds like a downgrade, but it sounds like they're taking like a step back. I mean, Megamix was, for all intents and purposes, supposed to be like a catch-all of all the Rhythm Heaven games in one, or as much as possible in one package. And this one, calling it Groove, feels like, oh, okay, it's like maybe a smaller game or something. But calling it Groove also feels like weirdly intentional, because Groove, I don't know, just makes me think of just like dancing. And then Jason and I were like, oh, well, there is this camera thing that they have there. I wonder if that's going to, you know, maybe play a part in it. And maybe there's going to be rhythm games a la Kinect or something that we're not going to have.
I think my exact words when we had this epiphany the other day, because we were talking about like how weird it is that, you know, same thing I was saying here, how weird it is that 2025 is all we know about Switch 2 games from Nintendo. We don't know anything in 2026 or even past July. And then he made this point about Rhythm and Groove. And the second he said, it sounds like Body Movement, I literally was just like, oh, crap, it's going to use the camera. Like that was, I was like, I don't want to dance physically for this. But yeah, I think we're onto something. I think that's going to be the Switch 2 edition of Groove will be the camera functionality, probably.
Yeah.
And honestly, Tomodachi Life, I've been thinking about it since we had that conversation. Again, why not the camera? Have it map your Mii. Make a Mii of anything you put in front of the camera, and it just does it using some sort of auto-generated thing. It already auto-generates voices for the Miis. Not that much harder to have it do a Mii building tool in the same way the 3DS used to have. So that's probably going to be the Tomodachi Life, like Switch 2 edition, is maybe it looks a little prettier, and for sure it like makes it easier to import your favorite family members and friends, or however they want to frame it, you know? But it's nonetheless weird to me that we're sitting here on the, you know, in the immediate aftermath of the Switch 2 reveal, talking about, well, what Switch 1 games are they going to bring to Switch 2 and how? Because we don't know any other Switch 2 games. It's so strange. So I thought that was a very interesting change of pace for Nintendo. On that same train of thought about missing first-party games, I'm also a little surprised, this is my last nitpicking, then if you guys have any, but I'm also a little surprised about how underplayed the Joy-Con mouse ended up being. I sort of said this in passing when we were discussing GameChat, but I really did think the mouse was going to be like a bigger differentiator of Switch 2 in Nintendo's eyes. So I was surprised to not see a game use it in a way you'd expect. Like it felt ripe for like a Mario Maker sequel, or like a Mario Paint revival, or like that type of experience with like, creation and doing stuff that's minute. Or really any games that can be played touchscreen oriented in handheld mode and then like swapped to a mouse cursor for TV play. Like that feels so obvious. And yet instead, so far, it's either an optional input. It's offering mouse aiming in Metroid Prime 4 on Switch 2, which is cool. Civilization 7 will support it on Switch 2, which is cool. So it's either that, or it's being used in almost like a motion control substituting kind of way. Like, we talked about Drag and Drive before, where you pull back on both Joy-Con mice simultaneously to like control your movement. And then you use motion controls to shoot the basketball, which I feel like motion controls could have fully covered that. Why do you need the mouse to do the movement where you can just make a pull back motion with gyro? Like what? Why? I don't know. It seems, I don't know. Same with like the Mario Party Jamboree stuff. A lot of those mini games feel like they could just be motion games instead of having a mouse, and even the Welcome Tour mini games. We were talking about how they have a bunch of stuff that uses the technology. Like, it seems like a lot of them could be pointer controls versus a mouse. Like, I don't know. It just seems you could do motion plus gyro and get the same thing. So it's just I don't know. Maybe these will require some hands-on time to see if it's that different. Once they're coming out or whatever. But I guess this does all fit. I guess what I'm now saying is weird does actually fit a point that I did see in the Ask the Developer interview with the Switch 2 leads. They were saying for them, and I can't believe I read these words in the Nintendo interview, it's not about finding a new gimmick or hook for the core hardware. That's a very different Nintendo than the last 20 years. They were saying, though, that they can save that idea for accessories, like how Ring Fit did on Switch 1 with its Ring Con, or how like the camera can do for camera play on Switch 2. For them, they're viewing everything on Switch 2 as just a tool set for developers to run free with as needed. So for them, the mouse isn't some new hardware thing. It's just another input that they can choose to use or not use, which, like, I'm sure a Mario Maker or Paint type game is coming down the pipe anyway. But it's just a little odd to me they didn't see making it as an early title in the Switch 2's life a priority to showcase there is this new feature, even if it is one of many. I don't know. And like some other developers are certainly going to fill that void sooner rather than later based on what they're saying. I mean, even today, there's this classic Flash game maker from like web, making like little browser games called, they also developed Shovel Knight Dig. They're Nitrome, and they announced today they're making a game called Mousework, where you use mice to do a whole bunch of different kind of like classic web-based mini games. They're all strung together with the premise of these mice are trying to find temp work at a like job agency. So it's some people are trying to leverage the mouse to like recreate experiences you can have elsewhere, but it's still a bit of a that Nintendo themselves didn't feel the need to go like all in on the mouse in like more mousy ways. Like at all.
Yeah.
Like again, the pointer in Metroid Prime 4 is cool. Don't get me wrong. And I've heard it's really cool that it switches in real time. Like if you're playing motion control and then you put the Joy-Con sideways on a surface, it'll instantly turn on the mouse. Pick it back up, it'll instantly turn the mouse back off and go back to gyro. Like that's super slick. But I feel like we're missing a huge piece of the point of the mouse. I feel like this is going to be an IR reader all over again, like on the Switch 1. I don't know. I'm hoping not, but it's interesting. So those are my nitpicks. Who else has nitpicks about the games we saw or didn't see?
I mean, like I said in the beginning, I am happy knowing that Rhythm Heaven exists. And I guess I definitely talked about the nitpicks I saw within Mario Kart.
Right.
But, or I guess more after the fact. Everything else, Metroid Prime, any more Donkey Kong, any more Mario, I'm already sold. I don't see any reason to learn any more about them that I don't want to discover myself. I just don't want a repeat of Mario Kart 8's Nintendo Direct.
Oh, like, dude, it's almost the same week. Like it's almost the same exact week of the month.
Like, yeah, it was informative, but it literally told us everything. There was like nothing left for the imagination. So
see, that's how I felt during the ultimate that ultimate direct that they had after like E3 direct, where they just went through every single minute change. That's
yeah.
See, you love that because you love that crap. But like
yeah. To be fair, also like Yeah, I should have maybe known better, like going into a direct about the game. No, maybe not. I mean, that was kind of. I think that Mario Kart one was one of the first of its kind, like where it just had a dedicated direct. I didn't realize they were gonna go in that hard. But yeah, but you to your point, Kevin. Yeah, for Smash Brothers, I did want to know every minute change or the fact that you could see that Olimar's glass cracks in this one. But yeah,
I will
but this
point
time I don't.
out
This time I don't.
the direct for Mario Kart World is 11 days shy of, or sorry, 13 days shy, I think, of being 11 years to the day after that Wii U one. Like it's going to be very similar in terms of depth, so maybe it's good you're dodging it. And we can try and keep the discussion of what they reveal there to a minimum here on the podcast too, just to spare you. But yeah, Kevin, do you have nitpicks? Nitpicks are always fun.
Nitpicks? None that we already haven't talked about, really. I'm really stoked for the mouse stuff. I'm very that is most likely how I will play Metroid Prime 4 when I do pick up a Switch 2. But at the same time, it still looks like the mouse mode still holds your hand a little bit. The way that, but that's also because that's how Metro Prime games play, right? Where like you're locking on. Hopefully, I can take that away and just play it as a standard first-person shooter.
I think I'll check and report back next episode, but I'm pretty sure you have to hold down a button to lock on. So if you don't hold the button, you should be golden.
Okay,
if I'm not mistaken, right?
But yeah, so, but then
I'll check,
also based on how based on the, I guess, type of projectiles that you're going to be shooting in Metro Prime 4 will, I guess, determine. I mean, that lock-on's there for a reason, right? Because
for sure, yeah.
So I don't know.
I'm very excited about Metro. I saw in passing, because I follow like the Kit and Krista accounts, and I saw in passing a little like short they did where they're basically like, I couldn't tell you what they said because I haven't watched it yet, but they basically were like, is Metroid Prime 4 being kind of, I forgot the word they used, like left behind or something. I kind of am getting that vibe. It is weird how they're showing it in both directs as kind of this like non-afterthought. That's unfair because it's in both directs, but it definitely doesn't feel like the marketing machine is fully behind it at this moment in time. Like the Treehouse sold me on it so much more than anything they showed in the much bigger 2 separate presentations it was in the past month.
Well, isn't that what a Treehouse is supposed to do?
In a way, but you're supposed to, yeah, but I feel like, yeah, I don't know. I'm curious if they're going to ramp up the marketing as we get closer to launch and once they clear Mario Kart.
I can only imagine, Jason.
I assume. Yeah, no, I assume. But it was interesting to see them, Kit and Krista, be like, are they forgetting Metroid? Because they know the ebb and flow of the marketing at Nintendo better than anyone. So that got me thinking, like, are they? Because I didn't think it before. And then when they said that, I'm like, maybe? So I don't know. But I'm very excited to try it. So I will definitely report back on mouse controls in particular. All right, there is one huge nitpick thing we need to talk about. Actually multiple parts. So this is the final chunk of conversation for this episode. For one final note for listeners as we head into this final bucket of topics I kind of deemed logistics, for lack of a better term. Everything that's happened that we're going to be talking about right now, price, messaging, pre-orders, whatever, we're obviously talking about through the lens of being customers here in the U.S. So certainly there are some aspects of the situation that apply globally, while other parts are regional. In fact, even in Japan, here's an interesting one I just learned. There is a region-locked version of the Switch 2 that will only play games in Japanese in Japan, and it will cost the equivalent of only $333 due to how weak the yen is over there. They also sell a normal region-free version that will cost closer to the $450 we're supposed to be paying. Meanwhile, over in Norway, the system costs the equivalent of $750. So point is, everything we're likely going to dive into from here on out is from the American vantage point, and I think it's just worth knowing in case there's any international listeners that like we're going to make some very specific points about very specific pricing, I'm sure. And yes, it is twice the price in Norway, but we're talking about it from our perspective. So with that said, we should dive into what's been the hottest conversation around this thing probably, which is the game price situation. Who has thoughts? No one.
No, I have thoughts. I'm waiting for Angel to. I typically always wait for Angel,
wow.
which is a mistake because I feel like Angel's always waiting for me.
Yeah, I should just
Yeah.
like call on you guys individually.
Yeah,
when
just
we do
call
the
on
old
us.
Ram Nintendo. Kevin, I know you have the hot takes. Let 'em rip.
Hold on. Why do I have the hot takes? I really need to know.
Because I feel like you are the more opinionated of the three of us in these sorts of things, and not as a negative, just an observation.
$80. I love Mario Kart. I will always love Mario Kart. $80, absolutely not. Are you kidding
See,
me?
there's the hot take. Thank you. There it is.
I understand,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
I understand rising development costs. I truly do. I don't, and I know nothing on game development, and I think this is where Angel will definitely have a more nuanced take than I do. But Mario Kart World is definitely more akin to like a Forza Horizon game, right? Like your open
Yeah.
world.
Or like how Need for Speed was for a number of games.
Yeah.
Or Burnout, or yep.
Yeah. But like currently at this time, it's
comparable.
comparable to Horizon. Horizon is still charging me $60. We just got to the $70 threshold, and you want to charge me $80 for a Mario Kart game? And that brings me back to my point of Nintendo knows that I'm going to pay $80. They absolutely know. As much as I hate giving me, it's this thing that I've said before where I love the passion and creativity that Nintendo brings to the game industry. I hate everything that Nintendo does as a business. And this is one of those moments where, man, Mario Kart World looks amazing. It sucks that it's constrained behind this terrible, terrible company that's obviously only here to take my money. And they will. And they know it. And the cope that I'm seeing from non-video game developers, layman's like me and you, who are coping about this price, like, get them. Like, you need to ride off Nintendo, dude. You need to get off them. Like, absolute $80, dude. Come on.
There's one thing that's interesting is I don't think since the N64 generation, like just to sort of even set the scene here, Nintendo did have more expensive games in the N64 generation. A cartridge costs more than a disc. And I guess you can argue they're making cartridges again now against discs and digital. But nonetheless, Nintendo, since the 90s, has not been at the forefront of price hikes. They have been, with their consoles and their games, more of a, I wouldn't say budget friendly because the stuff wasn't cheap, but they were a follower, not a leader in rising costs. So for them to not only follow into $70 games 2 years ago, but suddenly lead to 80, even though I guarantee you every other company is looking at doing $80 games and is waiting for that one company to make the jump and then they'll all follow. It's surprising to me that it was Nintendo who made the jump.
Mm-hmm.
And I suspect they made the jump in part thinking, well, we're in a new console generation and the next console generation that Xbox and PlayStation introduce will also have $80 games. But those are a couple years away. And again, they're not the ones that are presenting, that have the reputation of being a more value-oriented gaming platform. So it is, even though Nintendo doesn't do price drops on their core games ever, really, even though, Nintendo very firmly believes, we were talking about with Welcome Tour, how like everything they make has value, their perception of the value was always relative to others in a way that was more favorable to Nintendo. And this is the first time it's going the other way. And that's a bit of a hard pill for I think everyone to swallow because it's very out of character for Nintendo. And it does point to a Nintendo that I think is thinking differently now under different leadership. This is the first generation that Iwata had no involvement in. This is the first generation that Reggie had no involvement in. This is the first generation I think their NOE team had a different head. So they're coming in it with a different angle. Furukawa, president right now, was on the business side of Nintendo. He's been there forever, but he was on the business side of Nintendo. And I do think that obviously there's rising game dev costs, and obviously there's always factors they take into consideration. But there is a bit of a shift in how Nintendo views their products in terms of being leaders versus followers for stuff like price. And I don't know how to exactly feel about it, but it's definitely a pivot from what they've been doing for the better part of 25 years, So I could see why it was that much. It wasn't just sticker shock. It was like sticker shock in part because it was Nintendo, you know? And I also think for me, the thing I keep circling back to in my head is that there's actually two simultaneous issues Nintendo has happening here. There's the game price issue and there's the messaging issue. And they just keep feeding into each other. Like the fact that Nintendo did not discuss pricing in the Direct was an immediate red flag. The second they didn't say the console price, I was thinking before the thing even ended, I was like, oh shoot, it's going to be bad. You don't hide good news, you hide bad news, right? And like we were saying before, like the console price didn't strike me as particularly bad. But the fact that when the Direct ended, it was up to me and up to all of us to go figure it out for ourselves, that felt bad because it's so ripe for misinformation.
I could have sworn it was almost immediate, wasn't it?
What?
I could have sworn it was like, I could have sworn the Direct
console
ended,
was.
And we knew the price like almost immediately.
The console, yes. So the console, they put in a press release.
Right.
There's no central place to get the other information. And yes, people found it quickly, but that's how the misinformation started spreading. Because like Nintendo has there's two ways Nintendo can now communicate with us directly, right? There's the Nintendo Direct presentation, and there's that new Nintendo Today app that they announced the week before the Switch. Never mind their social feeds. And yet, because of the pricing choices they made, it felt like they almost were intentionally obscuring the price. So what ended up happening, console they announced, and it was in the press release, but what ended up happening with like the games, and even we still don't know like what the Switch 2 edition like pricing scheme is. We still don't know a lot of stuff. But what ended up happening is people tried to form this patchwork of information themselves and spread it through social media. And that led to all sorts of misunderstandings. Like for the hardware price, like I was saying, it was in the press release. Great. But the game prices, different retailers were saying different things depending on the region you were looking at. So folks would start making some quick currency conversions. But oh, wait, some regions were charging more for physical copies than digital copies. So, okay, maybe I just found out that on the Mario Kart website it says $80, which it did if you scrolled all the way down, $79.99. But in Europe, it's being charged, the physical is being charged more. So I assume that would mean, it's probably true here. So is it actually $90 here too? And a whole narrative was built around that. And because Nintendo didn't put any of this information in readily available places, like the game price stuff, not even to the press, like it wasn't something that was just a digestible, here's the breakdown of what to expect and why. Bunch of websites and videos started reporting wrong prices as fact. And then the narrative became its own beast. So even when Nintendo did say, actually, wait, it's just $80, which, by the way, they still verbatim have not outright said, like in a statement, like it's just $80. People were already in this narrative of it being more, and people just started like, it just left a more sour taste. And even when it was corrected down to 80, the fact that like there's this whole thing, like the discourse was already running away with it about it being absurd with wrong numbers. And then people were aggravated because they couldn't find the right numbers. And that all just kind of became this like soup of just like anger. And some of it's legit. Like the $8 price is a real thing, but it was not, they did not help themselves by burying it like that. You know what I mean? Like it was actually kind of fascinating to see. It was like a really interesting rapid fire example of how misinformation can spread on the internet. And like Nintendo seemed to have very much taken the angle that made such a wildfire possible, because even once that $80 price came out, yeah, it was higher than people's expectations. But then that was paired with, and now they're saying they're charging for Welcome Tour. And I'm sorry, the C button is behind a paywall in a year. And hold on, what's going on with like Switch 2 editions? And instead of being like point blank to the consumers, here's what to expect and why, here's why Mario Kart is what it is and why, here's what, this is and why, it just like exacerbated the whole situation. So it became not just about the $80, but about this grander like thing, and there's validity in everything about it. Nintendo nickel and diming, all that, but it just like it almost went viral off false information. So then the reality already had this baked in negativity that was beyond what it may have been if they just outright told you why and what at the start, And I think let's actually talk about that $8 price, because we got the first formal messaging about it today via all those embargoed interviews. They were all done on April 2nd, pre-tariff news. And what's interesting is we still don't really know what's going on. So Nintendo is openly planning what they're calling variable pricing for Switch 2 games. Doug Bowser explained it to the Washington Post. He said, and I quote, "We'll look at each game, really look at the development that's gone into the game, the breadth and depth of the gameplay, if you will, the durability over time, and the repeatability of gameplay experiences." So to be fair, Switch 1 had a similar setup. Some games were $60 from Nintendo. Others were occasionally 40 or 50. And obviously Tears of the Kingdom dipped its toe into being 70. But what's interesting here is like for Mario Kart World, they say there's no benchmark set yet for the variable pricing. So like, is $80 the high end of it? Will it go higher? Like as is a lot of Switch plus Switch 2 edition games that actually... like the content when they combine it, that's going to cost you $80 if you're buying it for the first time, which, yes, a standard Switch game is $60. You buy a $20 expansion, you get them all together in one Switch 2 edition at $80. The math kind of makes sense. But does that mean upgraded Switch 1 games are considered the same creme de la creme of Switch 2 experience as Mario Kart World? Are they offering the same, and I quote, durability over time and repeatability of gameplay experience? Is Kirby in the Forgotten World plus Star Cross whatever, is that the same as Mario Kart World in Nintendo's eyes? Does is there a negative connotation to the fact that Donkey Kong Bonanza is suddenly $10 less and retailing for $70? Like, what does that even mean? And more importantly, why is Nintendo still stretching out the justification for Mario Kart? We were talking about, the Mario Kart Direct on April 17th, and Bill Trendon was saying to IGN that the price will make more sense once you understand the breadth of the game, especially the single-player scope. And I don't know. If you have people chanting in the Treehouse live stream all day, every day, drop the price. You have people asking questions about what the prices mean, and you bury the price to begin with. I don't know if the best strategy is to wait an additional 10 days before justifying the price, especially if the original pre-order plan was in place. They were expecting people in mass, price concerns or not, to just blindly pre-order Mario Kart World, not even knowing what the full value of the game is. It just, and sure, a lot of people would. I would. Not gonna pretend I wouldn't. But it just seems like this whole like durability and repeatability thing. Like I don't know. It sounds like a lot of, obviously it's a lot of corporate speak for just we want to raise prices, but it's just such a weird circumstance. And to be fair to Mario Kart, it does give me a lot of durability and replayability. I bought it when it first came out on Switch 8 years ago. My most played Switch game to date, hands down. But like, does that imply something with how DLC will work? If it has repeatability and durability, does that mean like you get free updates? Is that could be probably not separate DLC? Like, because if it's premium price, it's not really that durable. The DLC, if the DLC is premium price, then where's that durability you speak of? Because it's not a durable experience. If you want the fuller experience, you need to pay even more. So it's just, maybe it is free. Maybe they're doing, I've been long wishing that Tetris 99 has the Maximus Cups, and I've been long wanting them to do that for Mario Kart, like themed weekends around upcoming games and just make tracks for them. Maybe that's what durability and replayability or repeatability means in this case for $80. No idea. But it's just, I don't know. It's just, I still have this like confused kind of bleh feeling about what's going on with all the pricing. And it's not just that it's $80, it's that Nintendo keeps like not being clear on what is $80, why is it $80, what will the next thing be, what's the comparable thing. Like, it's just just trust us, it is what it is, and you'll understand why. I mean, you kind of have to tell people why. That's kind of your job in marketing. So I don't know, it's messy. If I were to keep going, actually, I think what's also frustrating, I keep going.
Sure, keep
what's
going.
also frustrating, I think what's also frustrating and maybe a bit confusing is that somehow still, right now, as of today, as of this recording, Nintendo has still not given us the full story about other Switch 2 things in the way we're waiting for Mario Kart's explanation. Like, the overall messaging has been messy. Here's an example, one of many. Game key cards. You guys familiar with game key cards? Do you know the whole thing about game key cards?
Yep.
You are or not? Sorry.
I am.
Okay. I guess a bridge version for those listening that don't know. Instead of code in box Switch 1 games where you buy a plastic case and inside it's just a download code, they're swapping that out for a cartridge that you pop into your Switch, and it basically acts as a digital key to let you play the thing that's downloaded. A lot of confusion from people about like, is every physical game going to have this? No. Is every game card key gonna be game key card, gonna be tied to a Nintendo account because you're downloading it? No. But the fact that like they kind of just put this on a support page on their website, never explained it, and simultaneously we're talking about virtual game cards, which work totally differently. A lot of people started mixing and matching those. Well, if virtual game cards are your Nintendo account, then game key cards must tie to your Nintendo account, but they're just a physical piece of plastic that kicks off the download. What's the point of that? What it actually is, yes, it's a download, but they just came out today via an interview with GameSpot. They are basically, for all intents and purposes, actual game cards. So if you want to resell it, if you want to give it to someone, if you want to do whatever with it, anyone can download the game that's on that cartridge and have it on their Switch. And they use the cartridge to fire up the game. It's literally no different than how a physical cartridge works, except there's nothing on the cartridge. And the reason for this, it seems, which makes a certain amount of sense, like code and box, is so there's a retail footprint for that given game alongside everything else, because over half of Nintendo's purchases are still physical retail purchases. So this is a way for third parties who either can't afford the cartridge or whatever reason, don't want to pay for it, to have like a mini empty cartridge that achieves the same goal and gives them physical retail marketing. But man, there's one Nintendo thing that was saying one thing and one thing saying something else, and it took a week for Nintendo to just say, oh, actually, what they probably could have said on the support page when they first announced it. Or better yet, they could have announced this in tandem with virtual game cards and just made it all clear to begin with. So that's another thing they messed up. Here's another one they messed up. Physical Switch 2 editions. So if you want to buy, let's say, Mario Party Jamboree plus Jamboree TV, according to one customer service rep from Nintendo's UK store, you will get a physical Switch 1 cartridge of Mario Party Jamboree with a download code in the box to download the expansion that makes it Switch 2 compatible. Now, same store, different Nintendo customer service rep said, well, actually, it's all on the cartridge to begin with, which makes a lot more sense. And some third-party developers somewhere else echoed that, yes, it's all on the cartridge to begin with. Why was this even a question? How was this not communicated? Why is this not? They have so many pages outlining, here's what different Switch editions get you. We still don't know what the value of each one is.
You said customer service rep?
Yeah.
That's going to happen. That's.
But why? My point is, why did the question have to go to the customer service rep? Why did Nintendo not say up front how it works?
Oh,
even on the game box, even on the game box, all it says is Switch. I think it's something like Nintendo Switch game included with upgrade, or something like that. Like, it doesn't say, is it the cartridge? Is it the download? Like, what is this? So yeah, the conflicting information. They have all these great pages that outline all the different things they're doing for Switch 2 with Switch 1 games. Even a page. I mean, the depth they go into in some regards. They have a page where they are testing all 15,000 Switch games, and they have a whole chart of which games work and which games don't and what percentage. It's this blue graph, and then you can open these PDFs, and they list off all these games that won't work. There's like 24 of them. Like, they managed to communicate all that. They have another page that's like, here's some free, like, we're going to make Pokemon Scarlet and Violet run smoother, as well as, like, Big Brain Academy. And it's like a handy little page with that, and yet they couldn't anywhere just say how the physical Switch 2 editions work, or even what the pricing is. Here's a third issue they're trying to still figure out. We know the full expansions, or we think we know, the full expansions seem to cost $20. We know that others that are less but still add stuff, like for Zelda, they have the new Zelda Notes feature in the Switch app. Those will be $10 a pop. And we know that the ones I was describing for like Pokemon and Big Brain are free. But also, some of the $10 ones, like Zelda Notes, are free if you have Nintendo Switch Online. That's a nice perk. But then you also maybe get the $20 ones. It doesn't seem like it, but then Nintendo's being wishy-washy. Like Doug Bowser today was on CNBC, and he was talking about how Switch 2 editions are a value add for Switch Online, and he said, like Zelda, but said it broadly. Like, Switch 2 editions are something that, like, they were asking if Nintendo's basically making, like, Switch Online into almost like their own Amazon Prime. You know, it has like music and it has like all these different things. He's like, yeah, there's all these different things you can do. It's not quite Prime, but you know, all these different things. And like, it comes with like Switch 2 editions, like Zelda. It's like, okay, like Zelda doesn't mean all of them. it also doesn't mean only Zelda. So like what defines what comes with what? When are they going to tell us? Like it's so muddy, it's unclear. We're 8 weeks from launch, 7 weeks from launch. It just seems there's a lot of information that feels like they just kind of didn't stick the landing on, you know? And even when they try and clarify it, it somehow gets more muddy. Like I was pretty confident only the $10 upgrades are free for Switch Online subscribers, or maybe even just Zelda. I wouldn't even go as far as $10. But Doug Bowser's talking about it in these broad sweeping terms, and I'm like, oh, so is it more? Because that's cool. Like it's just, I don't know. It just seems like a mess. So that's where I think they can improve. And I think that's where a big part, that plus the price issues, is not helping them sell this thing. And lastly, one thing that's not helping them is the tariff situation, which isn't their fault. So hours after the Switch 2 came out, tariffs were announced to the tune of about 50% for both Vietnam and Cambodia, which are two countries that Nintendo very specifically moved their production lines to in order to avoid the tariffs against China that were the conventional wisdom of what Trump would do. Furukawa, like he even discussed this in the past in financial briefings, that they were adapting to, you know, what the situation will likely be. Felt like a slam dunk in planning, but Trump went totally off the rails, tanking the economy, and Nintendo's in a weird spot where they need to figure out what to do, what to charge. And now U.S. pre-orders have been delayed from the original April 9th to who knows when. And those pre-orders, another credit to where Nintendo's due, another slam dunk from the start, they plan these well. Like Furukawa, again, implied in a past investor Q&A, they'd be ahead of scalpers. And lo and behold, the system is in place to stay ahead of scalpers. Like the My Nintendo store had a really interesting setup where if you've been a subscriber for like a year or two of Switch Online, if you've played your Switch for at least 50 hours, and I forgot what the third thing is. There's a third thing, but basically you needed to have some bona fide credentials that you really are a Nintendo fan in order to buy through their store at first. And then they'd be sending out invites, and then you get an invite and you click it and you can get your Switch 2. They can't guarantee it will be there on release day due to whatever shipping reasons, but you know, if you're willing to wait a little, you could basically get a guaranteed Switch 2. If you'd rather go the major retailer route, they organized all the retailers with a coordinated launch of pre-orders all being on the same day, which I feel like often isn't the case. And yeah, like it was really well done in that regard, except then the tariffs screwed it up. So even when Nintendo does things right, they can't win right now, which is unfortunate. And now they're kind of in the middle of this, I don't know, like political firestorm, for lack of a better term. And I suspect, you know, there's stories coming out today that Doug Bowser was saying that tariffs didn't play a role in the original price of $450. I mean, I will take him at his word, but like obviously factors like the dollar versus other currencies, inflation, and I'm sure some speculative predictions of what market realities would be did shape it. So maybe it wasn't the exact tariffs that Trump announced that impacted, because those were announced when Nintendo announced. But you know, I'd again point to the cost of the Switch in Japan versus America, at least as partial evidence. And yet, you know, even as Doug Bowser's trying to distance them from the tariff thing, the fact that Nintendo has to pull the rug out at the last second, you know, they never want to be in a political situation. And there they were on the front page of CNN. Like the big headline was like, the Fed says they may have to raise interest rates due to the tariffs. And then like the second headline on the top of CNN was breaking news: Nintendo delays Switch 2 pre-orders due to tariffs. And if you went over to Fox News, they too were reporting it. And they even put partisan spin on it, which I thought was kind of funny. They didn't just say like Nintendo delays Switch 2 pre-orders. They're like, Nintendo delays pre-orders of, quote, most expensive console ever. And I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, again, like Nintendo doesn't want to be in a situation where they're paired with like a political controversy. And yet here they are. So I can't imagine, you know, they're screwing up some messaging, but I can't imagine how frustrating it is for everyone there to also not just be able to have to deal with their stuff, but also like these outside factors. And it's just like, I feel like PlayStation, Xbox went through their own turmoil with COVID being when they had to launch. And this is like, and Nintendo kind of got away scot-free with Animal Crossing just blowing up and working in their favor during the pandemic. I feel like this is like it's come back around, and now it's Nintendo's turn to go through some weird global situation. But yeah, it's I think some of it's their own making, some of it isn't, but it's just kind of a weird spot to be in. So on the upside, final thought, turns out a lot of the inventory is already here in the US for Switch 2 launch. And since the tariffs are part of the import process, there's a sliver of hope that somehow, maybe, I don't know, possibly, I doubt it, we'll see, that they could keep the price the same, at least the initial ones they sell, but we'll see. Doug Bowser did confirm, though, to CNBC, they do have Switches here in America already. They've been stockpiling, so time will tell. But yeah, that's kind of where I stand on all the Nintendo messaging right now. It's been very fascinating to have to try and follow the last few days. I don't know if you guys have strong opinions beyond what you already said, but obviously I had a lot of thoughts. So,
Well, definitely not. And just being caught up with all of that is probably why, because, yeah, like, I mean, it's no news to many people of this podcast at this point, but, like, I don't really keep up with a lot of the Nintendo news. I used to be more ear to the ground, and damn. Yeah. I mean, it's, when it's a lot of things kind of going on, when it's not just the gaming news itself, but, stuff happening outside of gaming that's also affecting gaming. But, it's times like this where I'm just kind of grateful that I can just, like, watch a direct, be like, cool, I think the Switch 2 is neat, look at the prices and be like, I don't mind. And, or maybe not even, like, think too hard about it, because I don't know. Like, honestly, I also feel like if for whatever reason it got delayed or it got maybe price hiked even more, that suddenly it's like, you know what? Like, I actually do feel like, say for whatever, hypothetically, it just got raised to like 600 or something like that, I probably would wait at that point and I'd be perfectly fine. Like, I think this is like the first console where I am perfectly okay just waiting and getting it eventually. Nintendo games are not ever made in a limited run capacity, with very, 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 very few exceptions. I've kind of stopped trying to get collector's editions unless it's for like Ace Attorney or something very specific that Nintendo isn't really going to do, or doesn't have a franchise that I feel I would do a collector's edition for. Even for Smash Brothers, it's most likely again going to be a GameCube controller, which I don't care about. So I feel like I'm in a unique situation where I can just like kind of take a deep breath and be like, cool, I could just focus on, put all that energy into the stuff I mentioned at the beginning of the show, which is, figuring out what I want to do with my art, figuring out what I want to do with learning Japanese and plenty of other hobbies, because it just becomes so diverse. But of course, Nintendo is a big core part of that. It's always going to be, because whether I get the Switch 2 or not, I'm still going to be playing a lot on my normal Switch. There is plenty of games on that library that are going to keep me busy for a long time to come, be it an actual Switch game like Rhythm Heaven, or still going through Final Fantasy VII OG version on Switch that is started like in January 2023. And I'm pretty sure I'm either where Remake ended. I actually don't know where Remake ends, but I know I'm more than halfway through its content based on just like what some friends have told me. But yeah, I guess that's
and
where
to
I'm
your
at.
credit, you do raise some good points in what you were saying about your own personal experience with this, and that like right now it is the like enthusiast crowd this is all hitting hardest with. Like someone who's more casual and is like, oh, I'll get a Switch 2 for Christmas for my kid or whatever, for little Timmy. If we're doing a full round Nintendo throwback, we gotta bring back little Timmy. So if little Timmy's getting a Christmas Switch 2, then some of this pricing confusion in this initial week or two won't be an issue per se. If it's in the budget for them, they're gonna get it. I think where it gets interesting for Nintendo is there is sort of like an expanding footprint of like the word of mouth that happens. And we've seen it in the past, when the enthusiast diehards get confused and start spreading this certain narrative of whether true or not, of like things not being a certain way, it does kind of leak out sometimes and it can sort of sink a ship. I mean, like not in like total sinkage, but PS3, $599 US. Like they adapted over the years to make that more accessible and stuff, but it was always kind of haunted by that. Like it did not do as well as PS2. It did not do as well as PS4. Like PS3 was like their weak year. And there are other factors as well, but part of it was definitely the marketing message. Wii U, the fact that fans were confused up front about Wii U sort of trickled or was like a bellwether or a canary in the coal mine for like other people being confused about Wii U. So depending on how Nintendo navigates this, it could end up being nothing, and people who, aren't buying it for a while are good, but there could be kind of this lingering ripple of this perception that the Switch 2 and its games are overpriced or aren't necessarily worth the value, and that could have longer term potential impact, or Nintendo could address it. 3DS was very overpriced when it first came out in a lot of people's mind. And Nintendo did that $80 price cut, and Iwata took a personal pay cut, and they did the ambassador games, and they kind of turned that thing around. It sold like 70 million copies. I mean, million units, which, is half of the DS, but still respectable. So right now it is, to your point, very like in the enthusiast space, all this like controversy, and it's all very like heat of the moment. Like things change rapidly, and the dust will settle, as we said at the top of the show. But it's I'm curious what the longer tail of everything happening now will end up being, especially if the tariffs don't work in Nintendo's favor and they do have to raise the price. A lot of people are just going to be priced out. People that may have been enthusiasts, people that maybe would buy it early on, like if they have to charge $650 for the thing, because 50% tariff on Vietnam on a $450 device, that's like $650, $700, right? Something like that. So it'll be interesting to see kind of where it shakes out, or if they do end up making all the games $80, does that mean everyone buys one fewer game and just keeps playing the ones they have? There's already a industry issue of the most played games never change. It's always Fortnite. It's always Minecraft. It's always Call of Duty. Like one of the biggest issues facing the industry, from what I've read, is that it's hard to sort of get into that space where people are playing a bunch of other games. Like if a kid loves Minecraft and is seeing the Minecraft movie and is, all about Minecraft, are they going to go play game XY? Are they going to want to play DK Bananza, or are they just going to be happy playing Minecraft, or get into the free-to-play stuff with Fortnite? So like any missteps Nintendo's taking now has risk of a longer-term impact for the entire Switch ecosystem, but the severity of it remains to be seen. So it's interesting. Yeah, I think you're right that like right now I'm obviously very in it, but I'm curious what will look like once the dust settles, but where the dust settles as well. So anyway, Kevin, anything on your side, or are we pretty much anything left to talk about with the Switch 2? That's all I had. 2 hours and 15 minutes later.
Personally, no. I'm overall mixed on the Switch 2. I love that it's more powerful. I love the fact that it seems to be like more powerful than like a Steam Deck, right? Obviously, I won't have.
I've seen developers straight up say that. Multiple developers.
Obviously, I won't have like my library of Steam games to play on there, and my Nintendo consoles are typically always my Mario Kart, Mario, Zelda machine anyway. So I'm not worried about that. If anybody has followed me during my run of this podcast, my Switch is plugged in, but it hasn't been turned on in like over a year, maybe even 2.
Right.
So,
and you're not alone with that, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not trying to. I'm not trying to disparage. I'm not trying to disparage.
Good at that game.
Oh, Jump Bears. Oh yeah, I kicked your ass in that game. And I'm not trying to like disparage the Switch. The Switch is overall a great console. It's not my great console, but it's a great console in its own right, And the Switch 2 seems to be an even better version of that. Where I get my mixed feelings are in the prices of the games, in Nintendo essentially fumbling just the conversation after an amazing Direct, in my opinion. That's where I lie. Sort of like a friend of the show, Kurt Bob, the way that he put it. It's like it's been a roller coaster with the Switch 2, quite honestly. And I don't think that I want to get on that ride right now.
Yeah, and that's the other, like, I didn't even think of that side of it, but that's a really good point. When I was saying, a minute ago about like how the long tail of it, there are people who are going to look at this, and yourself included, who are just going to be like, yeah, this is messy. I'm going to let them sort this out. And if Nintendo, and it could take a while, and by then you're on to other things. People's interests shift. You may double down on Steam Deck. You may, I don't know, maybe the PS6 will be out. Who knows by the time you like circle back around, and that could be a lost customer for Nintendo. I don't think in your case you're gone for good, but in other cases, if you're getting little Timmy a Switch 2 and oh, whoops, no, you're not. You're going to get Xbox Series S instead. Is he coming back around to Nintendo? Who knows?
Yeah, don't get me wrong.
The fumble could have an impact for sure.
I will absolutely purchase a Switch 2 at some point.
I know you will. Yeah.
Whether that's 6 months from now whether that's when it becomes readily available, when it's the OLED incarnation of it. Like, I will be buying this one, but I bought a Switch at launch, and because I was really excited for it. And to be fair, like, a lot of that excitement happened to be the fact that I didn't have a Wii U, and back then I was really stuck for Breath of the Wild. How wrong I turned out to be in that situation. But I mean, that still had like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, right? But and this does have World at launch, but yeah, I'm not ready to get on that roller coaster yet.
Yeah, and there's another. Wow, I lost my train of thought. There was something you said in there that I was gonna latch onto for a sec, but I forgot what it was. Oh yeah, so let's say hypothetically the price goes up, and we know I'm Jason the diehard, and I'm like, all right, I'm buying it. Who am I playing with? Who is in my game chat? Who am I using the Switch 2 camera for? Like, if there's not an initial like install base of people Switch 1, everyone was all about it. But if you have friends that are like, maybe not. In my case, I'll still buy it. But for a lot of people, if they're like, well, if none of my friends are going to buy it,
have we
maybe I'll hold
gauged
off
what,
too.
like, our group of friends, like us three are our group of friends?
I mean, it's funny because, like, just looking at everyone, there are a decent number of us that have a Switch.
Switches.
Yeah.
But I don't hear much about Switch. I know one person.
Right?
Yeah, I know one person who like is interested but is a little worried about the price, or not worried, but has expressed like it's kind of pricey. Who's in our group? I know one person just outside our group who was him. He was my bachelor party. He I think is getting it, but I assume, based on conversations we talk about all the time. But yeah, it's interesting that like the messiness of Nintendo now does have ramifications later, even and I didn't think about this when I was saying it before, in terms of your own social circle. Because if your friend, like, there is a social word of mouth that helps, push sales of games. Because if your friends are playing it, you want to play it too, and you get it, and you want to play it together. Especially on Switch 2, where I spent all that time at top of the show talking about the value proposition of GameChat and how like that's gonna have an uphill adoption rate, I bet, among certain groups, and like you really need your friends to want to do it. If your friends aren't there, they're not doing it. If they're not doing it, you're not doing it. If you're not doing it, do you need the system yet? If you're a more multiplayer-oriented person. So that's another avenue where Nintendo may actually hit a wall, the messier this is short term. There's a lot of factors. Like, Switch was, in hindsight, a bit of lightning in the bottle. In hindsight, it was a well-versed, experienced team that went through all the hardships of the Wii U and the 3DS and kind of knew what things to do and not do based on the failings they just experienced. And you fast forward however many years, and there's some people at Nintendo that have been there forever. We talked about Bill Trennan and Nate Bildorf and all that. And, on the business side for Akawa and a lot of the exec team. But there's also a lot of people that weren't there or that joined in like early days of Switch or whatever, and they only really know the like smooth ride they had with the Switch. So some of this may be, I wouldn't even call it arrogance by Nintendo. Some of it may just be lack of experience with like the bad side of Nintendo's history. They got the good. So when they're now hitting these challenges, they probably didn't anticipate some of these. They probably even think, oh, well, everyone loves their games. They buy Mario Kart $60 8 years after launch. Like, yeah, okay, we're going to charge a little more. But look, the yum to buck ratio here is so much better that no one's going to question it. It's fine. Except everyone questioned it. So like, I have to imagine there's also that element at play right now. So it's just such an interesting confluence of factors that could take what, like you said, Kevin, was a very exciting Nintendo Direct and a very exciting like proposition of Switch 2 and just kind of not death by 1,000 cuts, because I think death is too extreme, but definitely like light injuries by 1,000 cuts. You know what I mean? So yeah, it'll be interesting. I will say, and I've said this before, I think when we switched from Random Nintendo to Randomer Nintendo, it is a little more fun to podcast about Nintendo when they're not on top. It's a little easier to sort of, whether we know what we're saying or not, whether we're armchair analyzing or like actually like, whatever, it is more fun to be like, well, they could have done this instead of that. They should have done this instead of that. When a company's doing great, it's just like, yeah, they sold another 20 million. I'm enjoying the fourth Mario game I'm now playing. So what TV shows are you watching? But like, it will be a little more interesting as someone likes to talk about Nintendo to like talk about the situation they may end up in. But obviously Nintendo doesn't want to be in that situation, and I'd rather my favorite company like be on top. But silver lining, I guess, maybe more interesting podcasting to come. So it's an interesting time. But I think with that, unless you guys have anything else, maybe we wrap it there until we regroup in a week to talk about the exciting side of Switch 2, which are the games and going hands-on and, experiencing that hardware and that screen and all that stuff. So to make sure you guys don't miss that, be sure to follow us on your, or subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice, because this one is off cycle. It'll probably come out on a Monday, on like next Monday. So prepare. But if you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, if it still exists, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Pandora, our YouTube at Ram Nintendo. Our Twitter is also at Ram Nintendo, where we will be posting about this individually. You can find us on socials. In fact, if you want some maybe sort of light impressions of mine from the Switch 2 event or photos or whatever, I'll probably be tweeting some stuff and threading some stuff out. So follow me at JSR7 on Twitter and Threads. For other thoughts on everything in the world, there's Kevin at KVN Gomi on Twitter and Blue Sky. For illustrations, which Angel, I'm impressed. You're still doing one a day. For some really cool illustrations of just Angel's life in many ways. World of Weros on Instagram. And that might just about do it. So until next time, this has been Random Nintendo, but also Randomer Nintendo. And the final word, as all Randomer Nintendos have, goes to Kevin.
I wasn't expecting it to be the final word.